Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, November 16th, 2020. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Daniel Nichanian, founding editor of the Appeal Political Report. Some of those down-ballot races in referendums we had talked about before the election, how did they end up? And then later in the second half of the program, Paul Reickhoff will be joining us for a little debate on exactly what went wrong, some of those congressional races. Meanwhile, we're number one, folks. USC's 1 million new COVID cases in less than a week. As infections rage across the country, the upper Midwest, they're being defiant. Not going to take any measures to stop it. Team Trump's legal challenges, meanwhile, crumble as he almost admits he's lost the election. Good news on the vaccine front. Moderna reports its vaccine may have a 95% effectiveness. And it's easier to deliver than the Pfizer one. No relation, David Perdue chickens out of an Ossoff debate in the Georgia runoff. Trump's weekend rallies turned violent, 3 stabbings in D.C. While he, of course, hits the golf course. The Minnesota Republican state lawmakers sent alert of their COVID infections only to their side of the aisle. Federal judge rules that the acting DHS appointment is illegal and says Chad Wolf has no authority to suspend DACA. And lastly, Trump's plan to deny Social Security disability claims set to go into effect by the end of the year. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. We're very excited to have you with us. Don't forget, if you miss any part of this show, you can check it out on the Peacock app, the Choice channel. All you got to do, you can go into the Peacock app and you can just search for the Majority Report. That'll take you to the archived versions of the show and to the Choice channel. You can check out, they have like dayside programming. Then in the evening, you can see Mehdi Hassan's show and Zerlina Maxwell's show. And our show plays 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. And then I guess like maybe in the middle of the night if you're awake for it. But in the meantime, we also have some news. I want to welcome to the program. She's been here. She's been like hanging around the office a little bit. Yeah. But officially, I want to welcome Emma Vigeland to the show. Emma's going to be riding shotgun in this first hour of the program. Emma, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. We're here in studio, separated by our plexiglass dividers so we don't infect one another. We're being very safe here.
Very kind of you to call it plexiglass. It's actually a shower curtain that I set up, but nevertheless.
I was trying to make us sound fancier than we are.
I know.
Yeah.
But it is nice to be in studio with someone, and we have we should just tell people we have humidifiers and we have like a air purifier, and we got the window open. So I'm going to be back into sweater vest mode a little bit quicker than I normally would be. And I know that causes consternation amongst other folks out there whose names will go unnamed. But, some people don't think it's terribly stylish to wear a sweater vest, but I like it.
Huh.
Yep.
Well, I mean, if you own it, then it's your trademark, and then it becomes stylish once again.
It's very northeast of you, Sam.
Yes, it is. It is. It's very northeast of me. And it's also, sadly, my...
It's very Rick Santorum of you. Right?
I know it, but I got news for you. I was wearing that thing back in high school before Rick Santorum was just a twinkle. Exactly. He adopted it.
Fellow Northeasterner himself, unfortunately.
Yes, I know.
Is that what that doesn't count? Or maybe
Pennsylvania?
No, it doesn't count.
Folks, we are in the midst of a really bad situation with COVID across the country. There are 11 million cases of COVID-19 being reported in the United States. Hospitalizations are now topping, well over 65,000. I think we're close to 70,000. It's going back and forth a little bit. On Friday, there were 184,000 new confirmed cases. Over the weekend, some of the data gets a little hinky, so it's tough. Things better to rely on, like what happening on Monday or Friday. There were 1,400 deaths on Friday. It was. It feels like it was less than a month, and it probably was, where we were just saying new cases were in the 80,000s, and like I say, we recorded 1 million new cases in a little bit under a week. Deaths, there were 620 new deaths reported on Sunday. Again, that is the Sunday reportings are lower, but that is the highest death rate on a Sunday reported since May 17.
Right, and it should be noted that in terms of hospitalization rates, Hispanic and Latino people over 4 times the rate of white people, Black Americans, it's around 3.9 times higher. So this is disproportionately affecting people who are more likely to be working in industries like the food service industry, healthcare, things like that, essential workers, and it's just getting worse and worse over time.
And to some extent, I should not say to some extent, to the extent that we have any good data on this and any good science, the more you're exposed in a given moment, the worse the infection actually can be.
Right, so which is so different than other diseases. I mean, it's really remarkable in that.
It's not binary.
Exactly.
And so, we are facing sort of the worst of all worlds in terms of this surge happening. It's not necessarily coincidental, but people are going inside more generally. The air is drier and colder, and so the efficacy, I guess, if you could call it, of the disease to infect other people goes up. And of course, we're right in on the front end of the holiday season, so people are going to go inside more with other people who are coming from other places. And I guess the fourth element is we have an administration that is completely out to lunch on this.
Well, and then now that he's lost the election and is sort of acknowledging that fact, it gives him even less of an incentive to take it seriously, because he doesn't take anything. I mean, it was the same thing with why you and I both argued that Pelosi should have accepted Mnuchin's package before the election, because now that Trump's lost, there's zero chance that a stimulus is coming at all, or at the earliest in February.
Yes. I mean, I can't imagine any other scenario.
As cases surge and deaths surge and the economy gets even more in dire straits.
There is good news about vaccines. However, I mean, under any circumstance, we're not the vaccine is not going to become terribly relevant until early spring, in the best case scenario. Moderna. And remember last week we heard from Pfizer and its partner BioNTech had a vaccine that was considered to be more than 90% effective, right? And there's obviously got to be more study on this, but Moderna's vaccine, which is co-developed with Anthony Fauci's institute, is being tested in 30,000 people. Half received 2 doses of the vaccine, half received placebo. And what happens is they vaccinate 30,000 people. They let them live their lives, and they see statistically, the likelihood of people getting the placebo and getting the vaccine. Theoretically, if the vaccine doesn't work, there should be more or less the same amount of people who catch COVID, whether they got the placebo or the vaccination. Of the 95 cases of COVID-19 amongst these 30,000 people so far, the disease, 90 of those 95 were in the placebo group. There were 11 severe cases, and all of those people received placebo. So the 5 people who did get it with the vaccine did not get the severe cases. Now, here's how this works. You need to have a certain statistic that needs to be hit to move to the next stage of emergency use authorization. You need to have 150 cases. So you need to basically have a third more cases than they've already had amongst this 30,000 people to get a statistical notion of how effective it is. They presumed that they would not get 150 cases until early next year, January, maybe February, because of the rate in which people catch COVID. If you have 30,000 people, you can expect only 150 cases over a certain period of time. Well, because the country is basically on fire with COVID, they anticipate hitting that next third of infected people within 7 to 10 days. They are months ahead of schedule because COVID has increased, the infection rate in this country has increased that much faster.
It's the faintest silver lining imaginable, but it is one.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, it cuts both ways, I guess. Moderna was part of Operation Warp Speed. That is where Moderna received $2.5 billion from the U.S. to support their research. The Pfizer and BioNTech did not.
That was more the German government, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Trump took credit anyway.
Of course he did. Of course
he could have just waited and take credit for the Moderna one, which he would have more direct involvement in, but of course not.
Exactly. He couldn't help himself.
Right.
The other good news about the Moderna thing is one of the difficulties with the Pfizer vaccination is that it needs to be kept incredibly cold. And there's just not that many facilities and abilities to keep it that cold, particularly when you start moving into more rural areas. The Moderna apparently is much easier in that regard. It can be stable at refrigerator temperatures for a month and frozen for up to 6 months. So that's very good news. But again, we're going to have to go through a hellacious period before we get to that point. Meanwhile, here is Donald Trump. And I don't know why Donald Trump, well, I do know why he's pretending it, but I don't know why Donald Trump thinks that he has any say as to who's going to get this vaccination, because I got news for you. We're not going to see it until he's long gone. But here he is at the White House yesterday, or Friday.
Waiting for that final approval. As soon as April, the vaccine will be available to the entire general population, with the exception of places like New York State, where, for political reasons, the governor decided to say, and I don't think it's good politically. I think it's very bad from a health standpoint. But he wants to take his time on the vaccine. He doesn't trust where the vaccine's coming from. These are coming from the greatest companies anywhere in the world, greatest labs in the world. But he doesn't trust the fact that it's this White House, this administration. So we won't be delivering it to New York until we have authorization to do so. And that pains me to say that. This is a very successful, amazing vaccine at 90% and more. But so the Governor Cuomo, will have to let us know when he's ready for it. Otherwise, we can't be delivering it to a state that won't be giving it to its people immediately. And I know the people of New York very well. I know they want it. So the governor will let us know when he's ready. He's had some very bad editorials recently about this statement and what's happened with respect to nursing homes and his handling of nursing homes. And I hope he doesn't handle this as badly as he's handled the nursing homes. But we're ready to provide it as soon as they let us know that they'll actually use it. And again, it's a very safe and a great vaccine.
I like the idea of Cuomo just hoarding all of the vaccines.
He's going to hoard all of them. And of course, he's got some bad editorials lately. You know, Donald Trump had a bad editorial recently, too. It was one that was signed by 77 million Americans, right, basically telling him maybe next time.
And he honestly might run again next time. I am not ruling out 2024. Now that I've thought about it a little bit more, I think he's going to launch Trump TV, and that ego, it knows no bounds, and he could win the Republican primary again.
I wouldn't rule anything out, but I also think 4 years away seems like a lifetime. And
totally.
And who knows? I mean, we are going to go through the next 3 months with the potential of getting close, at least in terms of, we're going to get close, I think, by the end of this, to losing as many Americans as we did in the 1918 pandemic,
right?
And 17 pandemic, and it's 1918 pandemic. He kept saying 17, and I would imagine that's going to stick, but we shall see. We're going to get to Daniel in just a moment. First, from your bed to your bathroom, Brooklinen has got you covered, and this holiday's no exception. Oh, you know, this might interest you. I know you're getting a new apartment soon. Brooklyn's biggest sale of the year is coming soon.
Wow.
Yes, they got great stuff for gifting. There's people on your list, but they have a huge selection of stuff. They've got candles, they get silk eye masks, scrunchies, robes for a spa treatment type of situation. But of course, they sell some of the best towels I've ever had, and all of my sheets are Brooklinen sheets. They've got two different types. They've got like the classic, and then they've got this other, I guess it's like a softer. I don't like that one. I like the classic, cool, crisp cotton ones. They've got great patterns, and
well, joke's on you. I already have Brooklinen sheets.
Oh, well, boom.
But I need new towels.
Their towels are excellent.
Yeah.
They're, sometimes you get like really plush towels and they don't feel like they're absorbent.
Yeah.
This is exactly the opposite. They're plush, but they're absorbent.
Oh, love it.
They're fantastic. You can cozy up to Brooklyn's biggest sale of the year, and it's coming soon, folks. Brooklyn is so confident in their product. All their sheets, their comforters, Mania Comfort loungewear, towels come with a 365-day warranty. Get huge savings and free shipping during Brooklyn's biggest sale of the year, only at brooklinen.com. That's brooklinen.com. Use the promo code MAJORITY to let them know our show sent you. That's brooklinen.com. Promo code MAJORITY. Let them know that you're over there. And if you can't wait for the sale, you're just hearing it. It's this because it's post Black Friday or Cyber Monday. You could still use the promo code MAJORITY at brooklinen.com for 10% off and free shipping in the U.S. So make sure you use that code. Also, we're in an era where you don't want to leave your house very much, and where someone like myself with a little bit of a shut-in, it becomes a positive. Well, with Stamps.com, you don't have to leave your house as much. You don't have to leave your home business as much. Anything you could do at the post office, you can do with just a few clicks. Plus, Stamps.com saves you money. They have deep discounts that even the post office you can't get at. You can use your computer to print official U.S. postage 24/7. Forgot to send that letter? You wake up in the middle of the night because you can't sleep. You can print out a postage. You can do it for any letter. You can do it for any package. You can do any class of mail. It doesn't matter where you're sending it, anywhere in the world. And you just schedule a pickup, or you can drop it off. Up to you. With Stamps.com, you get 5 cents off of every first-class stamp and up to 40% off priority mail and up to 62% off of UPS shipping rates.
Wow.
Yep. Don't spend a minute of your holiday season at the post office this year or walk into the UPS or wherever it is you go. Stamps.com. There's no risk. And with my promo code Majority Report, you get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale. You don't have any long-term commitments. There's no contract. Just go to stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, type in Majority Report. That's stamps.com, enter Majority Report, stamps.com. You'll never have to go to the post office again. You never have to leave your house.
Love that.
Online shopping. Oh, and this is the other thing. I had mentioned earlier that I have a little bit of a sartorial challenge. Well, I no longer have that problem. I've actually got an exciting thing to say about Stitch Fix today. I mean, it's not that exciting, but you want to do some shopping? Stitch Fix can help you. Can help you both with your holiday shopping and with your own clothing shopping. Stitch Fix offers clothing that's hand-selected by expert stylists. Figure it out, your size, your style, your budget. It's a completely different and a fun way to find clothes that you're going to love to wear. You try on the pieces at home before you buy. You keep what you love. You return the rest. Easy peasy. You just pay a $20 styling fee for each box, which gets credited towards any pieces that you keep. There's no subscription required. You can try Stitch Fix once, or you can set up automatic deliveries, shipping, returns, exchanges. Like I say, easy and totally free. Prepaid return envelope is included. Stitch Fix has styles for women, for men, for kids, and they ship all of the U.S. and available in the U.K. too. So for me, I got these chukka boots. I don't know how to pronounce them, but they're like desert boots. I got them actually at the beginning of the year. I was very excited because they were very adult looking shoes. And then, of course, everything shuts down. I can't go out that much and show them off. But I've been kicking around in the 5-pocket Nashville fit pant, flag and anthem.
Yeah.
I had totally reintroduced that sort of like jean cut to me. I hadn't done that in a long time. And then I also got this, I sent back a turtleneck, a mock turtleneck. I don't do those. That I don't engage in.
You only like the sweater vest, not sweater around the neck too much.
I don't do a turtleneck. I don't do a mock turtleneck.
Yeah, well,
I don't do anything like that. But
I've
I also
heard great things about Stitch Fix for outside of this.
Like, I got a thermal long sleeve thing that was like sort of throwback to my days as a slacker, and I was like, I don't know about this. I'm going to keep it. Now it's like I go days, and I'm only wearing that.
Yeah.
Yes, because I'm in the house and it's perfect, particularly in this weather. You can get started today at stitchfix.com/majority. You get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. That's stitchfix.com/majority for 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. Stitchfix.com/majority. You're going to see me in some new Stitch Fix shirts. I just, some
new stitches, one might say, one might call it. Okay.
All right. I'd like to, welcome to the show. Do we have him? Daniel Nichanian. He is the founding editor of the political report for The Appeal. It's a project of The Appeal that covers local politics, criminal justice, mass incarceration. He, of course, also writes in the political report and sends a weekly newsletter. Daniel, welcome back to the program.
Hi, it's great to be back.
So, Daniel, let's start with this. Now, if folks remember, you were on the program, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and you were outlining for us some races that will have the most important impact on not necessarily our immigration policy, but how our immigration policy touches immigrants in this country. And it was a fascinating conversation where so much we hear about policy is personnel. In this instance, it's sort of like it is the execution of policy is also a function of personnel. We're hearing a lot about the idea that there's a lot of laws on the books and the president has the opportunity to step in, choose which ones they're going to focus on and give resources to. This happens on a local level. So let's start with, and I know you've written about this, the races that you were tracking for sheriff. Remind us again why the sheriff is so important I mean, I used to make a joke about this, but the sheriff is really, really important, particularly in the context of immigration. Why is that?
Right. You know, a lot has changed since we talked a few weeks ago on immigration, maybe more than most issues, because of President Trump and Stephen Miller are on their way out of the White House, and that's definitely going to change a lot in immigration policy. But ICE, based on everything we know about President-elect Joe Biden's policies, ICE is still going to be there in the picture. ICE is still going to go after immigrants, and when it comes to ICE's ability to identify people who ICE thinks are undocumented, arrest them, kind of put them in the detention infrastructures. Local law enforcement are often very, very important. Specifically, sheriff's department in a lot of places have a lot of sway over just how much local governments are going to be cooperating, either through contracts, through like actual formal on paper contracts, or through a set of informal practices. And you know, over the past many years, it's really been a focus of organizing for immigrant rights groups around the country that have really put the focus on sheriff's offices and sheriff's elections, because these are obviously elected offices, to really put the issue of ICE, the issue of cooperation with the federal government on immigration enforcement at the center of the elections for sheriff, in a way that really is new, in a way that's really a new issue in these elections. And we saw in some and when we saw in some places again this year success for that effort.
And so, all right, so give us some of the highlights, I guess, and the lowlights of that, because it also, I mean, I'm curious both obviously for the implications of, you know, the relationships with ICE and hopefully things will change to some degree under a Biden administration, at least the posture that ICE takes. But it's also indicative of what's happening in these communities and their perspective towards this stuff, how they reacted. So where were the biggest changes in terms of those elections with the greatest implications?
Well, what's interesting is that the South, again, was the centerpiece of the setbacks that I suffered. I say again because in 2018, North Carolina really was the emblematic state where a wave of sheriffs were elected in 2018, the biggest counties in North Carolina, on promises to end contracts with ICE. And the same thing happened in some very big counties last week. I think it was last week or a couple of weeks ago. I forgot where the election is, in Georgia and South Carolina, and specifically in Cobb and Gwinnett counties. So maybe some of our listeners have really heard of Cobb and Gwinnett recently, because they were really they're very big suburban counties in the Atlanta region that drove the success for Democrats at the top of the ticket as well. They really shifted Democratic. But that is not that the shift Democratic does not automatically translate, first of all, to Democratic gains down ballot. Also does not translate to the election of DAs or sheriffs that are running on actual reforms. Like we know from a lot of examples that Democratic sheriffs and DAs actually have cooperated with practices of the sort. But in Cobb and Gwinnett have had very long-standing aggressive policies towards their immigrant residents. The sheriff's offices in both counties have been very aggressive towards immigrants and towards contracting with ICE. And in both cases, there was really a lot of organizing by immigrant rights groups like the Asian American Advocacy Fund or Mi Gente, to put these issues on the table and convince Democratic candidates to run on these issues, to promise to stop ICE contracts. And in both Cobb and Gwinnett, Democrats flipped the offices, and sheriffs are incoming who have promised to break what's called the 287G contract with ICE and other forms of ICE cooperation. And you know, that sort of organizing, that sort of activism could translate in a couple of months into energy. Obviously, the runoffs in Georgia is what we're all going to watch, right, over the next 6 weeks. So it's important to not lose sight of these grassroots efforts that have also happened in Georgia.
And Daniel, just a quick question or clarifying. Can you talk about what that means tangibly for contracts to be ended with with these areas in Georgia, for example? Like, what does that mean in practice?
Yeah, so the emblematic form that the organizing of contract is what's called the 287G agreement, which really is the tip of the iceberg in terms of all the forms that cooperation between sheriff's offices and ICE takes. But let's just focus on 287G because that's what a lot of the conversation was about. 287G is a contract that effectively authorizes law enforcement at the local level to act as though they were federal agents when it comes to identifying, interrogating and arresting people who they suspect to be immigrants within the jail space. And this is something we talked about a month ago, Sam, which is that jails are really a space where a ton of people kind of go through, especially people of color who are likelier to be arrested. It can be for any sort of low level infraction as well. You can end up being booked in jail, even if you never could convicted of a crime, even if you never end up with a criminal record, even if for anything really. And that under the 287G contract, those sort of low-level, constant, routine interactions that thousands of people go through a year, those become effectively immigration checks or places that local law enforcement can go after immigrants, and that was the focus of organizing to end that form of emblematic link between local law enforcement, which has no business running the federal government's immigration policies, to end that. And that was, this is kind of obscure in the sense that it's like a bureaucratic agreement of how to deal with people in jail. The fact that it became visible enough to become covered, to become something that candidate forums were really discussing, to become something that Democratic candidates had a position on. That is not none of this is obvious. I think I want to emphasize that, and it's not something that I see happening in some places where that doesn't necessarily have that level of organizing. We don't necessarily see this level of visibility for any of this. So that's really what the success is, as well as the actual result.
Was there any other races across the country where you saw something that was similar in terms of both outcome and that level of activism that raised, basically forefronted an obscure agreement that really had big implications?
If we're talking about ICE specifically, I talked about the South, but in places like Cincinnati in Ohio, and Athens, Georgia, and other places, the Democratic primary saw the ouster of an incumbent sheriff by a challenger who, again, was talking about ICE as an important issue. And in what's interesting in Cincinnati, for instance, which is a fairly large jurisdiction at the county level, in particular, the incumbent sheriff, a Democrat who had attended a Trump rally in the past, then endorsed the Republican in the general election against the Democratic challenger. The Democrat still won and is now going to come into office, which also is a reminder, again, of the lack of visibility to these local offices, that a sheriff in a Democratic-leaning county can attend a Trump rally. And, this time was unseated, but so many sheriffs like that, so many prosecutors, so many local officials escape that level of scrutiny, escape being contested, escape the visibility. So for every story like Cincinnati, where a kind of ICE cooperating, Republican-friendly Democrat was ousted in an urban area, there's a lot of examples where that level of visibility hasn't been achieved.
I'm curious about those, about Cobb and Gwinnett and Cincinnati there. I mean, do we see what happens in the other ballots in that district? In other words, is it the candidates who came out against ICE?
Right.
Are they how consistent did the Democrat win in those districts? I'm just curious as how telling is that race to, I guess, up ballot races?
Great question. So that will depend on the place. On Cobb and Gwinnett, Democrats did very well. across the board, there was kind of a bloodbath for Republicans at the local level. In Cincinnati, that it was more mixed. The Republican prosecutor, for instance, won re-election. I could go into some of the debates in that race. So that was a more mixed. There are other sheriffs in Democratic areas or places that when the Democrats were longtime sheriffs that are Republican won in places like Pinellas County in Florida and other places. Which is to say, again, one, that it's not obvious that the Democratic shift up ballot would translate down ballot. And two, again, it's not obvious that the issues that progressives would care about or reformers would care about would be the sort of thing that would at least be part of the conversation. So I think the success, again, is as much about the result than about the ability of reformers and organizers to inject these issues into what was overall a democratic shift in places like Cobb and Gwinnett.
All right, so let's broaden our focus here in terms of other things that I know that you were tracking, and you had set up a site. What's on the ballot? Mm-hmm. Take us through some of the bigger ballot measures you were watching, and maybe some of the bigger down ballot races that you were watching that you thought were pretty key, and how did the Democrats do on that accord?
Right. There's so much to go over. I had 400 or so things to watch on my tracker, which you just mentioned. I think maybe one place to start is initiatives. There were a number of initiatives on the ballot that pertained to the war on drugs, to curtailing the war on drugs, to changing drug policy. And that is both interesting because of the number of ballots there were, but also because everything that was on the ballot to that effect succeeded. So perhaps the most interesting is Oregon's Measure 110, which I didn't necessarily have a clear expectation going in because there was never really a vote on a measure like that anywhere in the country, as far as I know, because what a Measure 110, which passed overwhelmingly 2 weeks ago, does is that it's going to decriminalize drug possession writ large. So not just possession of marijuana or certain specific, a smaller number of listed drugs, but drug possession writ large at low amounts. It is not going to legalize it. It's still going to remain a matter of law enforcement and going to be treated like an infraction, which itself raises some questions about equality of enforcement,
right,
and so on. But it's the first state in the country that is taking this approach to drug possession. And that is important to potentially changing the conversation around the country to whether questions of substance use, questions of addiction, are a matter that the criminal legal system should be taking charge of, or whether they're a matter as to the extent that anyone's taking charge of them for other types of services, other types of systems to kind of have on their purview.
Or like
so it could really potentially change the conversation nationwide. Yeah.
Or like a Portugal type model, something
right.
like that.
Exactly. The Oregon initiative was inspired by the Portugal model. It's like the first time that's kind of coming in to the conversation in the United States. And, I don't think we should expect a lot of other states to just pass this suddenly in January. But in terms of creating somewhere in the United States that can be pointed to as doing another sort of approach to the war on drugs, that could potentially really change the conversation. Especially because what we're also seeing is a number of prosecutors win DA elections now on a similar message of saying they are not going to prosecute drug possession. They're not going to file criminal charges when it comes to drug possession. And it's not up to prosecutors to overall legalize or decriminalize anything in terms of they can't control what the police does, for one. But the message sent by a place like Austin, Texas, 2 weeks ago that elected a prosecutor that ran on that platform of saying this is really not up for the criminal legal system to take charge of. If we should fund instead more services in health, in public health, etc., that also sends a powerful message that kind of goes hand in hand with what happened in Oregon.
I mean, it's interesting how that topic will both sort of implicate the question of, the so-called defund the police movement, also, what's amazing to me about it is that it's an issue that has been more or less orphaned by the national parties, right? I mean, as far as I know, there is no, I don't think it was in the Democratic platform. I think the Republican platform was just supporting Donald Trump. So I don't think there was any actual positions in there. And I'm not being facetious about it. I think it was just our platform as we like Donald Trump. But the Democrats, I mean, I guess it's hard to know, but there was it won every single place in every form, any ballot measure. What were we talking, like almost a half a dozen at least?
More, yeah. So there were a lot of initiatives to lead on marijuana, specifically to legalize marijuana, and those passed both in New Jersey, which obviously is a Democratic state, in Arizona, which is a swing state that has had a punitive approach to marijuana, so definitely going to be a big deal going forward. Also passed in South Dakota and Montana by comfortable margins. I think the margin in South Dakota was 8 to 10 points, and even more so in the other 3 states. And you are right that no one on a presidential ticket, Joe Biden did not run on legalizing marijuana. He did not endorse that position. He definitely had some policy positions on curtailing the war on drugs and in some other ways, but he did not support the thing that passed in very red states. So there's definitely a gap there between what the national conversation is and what the state conversation is. The good news for proponents of ending the war on drugs is that states have a ton of authority, a ton of leeway in how they're going to deal with criminal charges and how they deal with how they fund services. Obviously, it's not the end of the story, but the movement we're seeing on marijuana in the 4 states I said, and the other states that have already done that, and in Oregon, on drug possession writ large and these DA elections, that's a huge part of the story, irrespective of what the federal government does. But yeah, at some point, it's interesting to see what the gap closes.
Right. I was going to ask, just based on, and I think I already know the answer, but based on your tracking of these ballot initiatives, if Democrats were to embrace these kinds of ideas, and now Chuck Schumer saying he's for legalizing marijuana as he faces a primary challenge in 2022, right? Like, how much do you think that would drive things down ballot when it comes to future races?
Yeah, I think
races and things like that.
Right. I mean, I think you're right that a lot of Democrats have already embraced it, and in the states I mentioned, were either involved in putting it on the ballot or supportive of it. But the messaging, yeah, there's a disconnect in the messaging. It's not quite clear what the fear is of embracing something like marijuana legalization. You know, it had passed in Michigan in 2018 by about 10 points. I'd say Michigan because obviously it was on everyone's mind going into 2020 as one of the 3 most important swing states in terms of what the political cost or benefit of it would be. It's hard to know what. So I don't foresee that there would be a particular cost specifically on marijuana, but also on other issues. But I think what is happening and what's actually very interesting is that candidates for county office or state office have seen this already. And just this year, the number of candidates who were comfortable saying things like, we will not prosecute drug possession or other low-level behaviors like that was just much greater, I think, than a couple of years ago, or even before that, let alone before that. So we are seeing candidates realize that if they are interested in criminal justice reform and ending mass incarceration and everything that goes with it, they are seeing that the benefits of running on those things locally exist, and that the perceived costs of from the past 30, 40 years of fear of how elections are won on issues like this, that those costs are actually no longer really operative. And so that, I think, should be a sign of hope if you want change on these issues, that at the places where change could happen, there is a growing awareness of change of expectations.
I think the answer as to why you just have local people who are addressing this as opposed to national Democratic figures is a function of they still have an incentive structure and a perception of like the political terrain as if it was 1991. And
or even Reagan era.
Well,
right?
yeah,
like
exactly. But I mean, 91
drugs.
is that sort of tail end of the Reagan Bush years,
right?
And the big door opening was Bill Clinton saying, "Well, I tried marijuana, but I did not inhale. I just brought the joint to my lips and just made it look like I was cool, and then didn't inhale." All right. So, what is in terms of other measures that stick out? I know that we had a $15 minimum wage pass in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Were there other big progressive agenda items that were passed that were unlikely in some respects? I mean, in California, we saw, it's almost like the mirror image of Florida in some respects, right? Florida passed the $15 minimum wage, but the Democrats get blown out. And in California, Democrats all, of course, win, but things like carving out a little part of Proposition 13 so that we can actually get legitimate property taxes from commercial enterprises there, that didn't pass. We had ballot measure number 22, which basically will have, I think, devastating impact on our labor laws across the country, but narrowly seen as carve out for, Uber and Lyft and other gig economy type of things to basically misclassify their employees. It's no longer called misclassification because of that. What else did we see that we should take note of?
I think that's a great way to think about it. Just in many places, the gap between what you expect from the presidential ticket or the other results and down-ballot. But what's interesting in Arizona, maybe to go along with what I was saying about Georgia, which is that the shift to Joe Biden coincided, at least in some places, with this progressive shift, right, on policies. In Arizona, what's interesting is that obviously the first time that a Democrat won a presidential election in quite some time. And what we saw at the level of ballot initiatives is, first of all, I was just saying the initiatives to legalize marijuana won by about 20 points, but also Arizonans voted to increase the income tax on higher incomes to fund the education system, to fund more teachers and better paid teachers. So that's, again, Arizona is not historically the state where you'd associate with success on a measure like this. But in fact, in recent years, it really has been a site of contestation for the Red for Ed movement, for the strikes around teachers' unions, and we saw that around the country, but in Arizona specifically. And this measure was linked to that, and the success, it's a success of messaging around that. It's a success for progressive policies, and there again we see kind of a contrast between Arizona voted to increase taxes specifically on higher income earners. Illinois, which is a very blue state, obviously voted for Biden by a much larger margin, voted narrowly against making its income tax progressive. At the moment, the income tax in Illinois is flat, and at least it has an income tax, which obviously is
right
more than many places, but it's flat, and it would have made it progressive, and that failed. So I don't have a clear explanation for what happened in Illinois. It kind of fits the California example, where constraints on revenue raising and progressive policymaking that has existed for a long time, the ability to change it failed. There's also obviously been a very long-standing efforts in places like California by conservative interest groups or other groups to protect the legacy of Prop 13 and the anti-tax initiatives of Prop 13 from the 70s. Whereas in Arizona, there was a bipartisan, like the Red for Ed movement had a bipartisan movement. It was successful, and yeah, that's an interesting disconnect.
Building on Emma's question about framing, is it and maybe, and I will accept I don't know as an answer to this, but can we tell, if Arizona went for Biden because there was a confluence of all of these different activists who were maybe pursuing the taxation, maybe coming out of the Red for Ed thing, maybe had organized because of Arpaio, the sheriff organizing that went there some years ago. I mean, and there's a greater motivation at that level when you're talking about a local issue. Like, if I'm interested in a local issue, I'm going to come out and I'm going to vote on it. And then I vote up ticket. Georgia, running against ICE in Georgia, at least in these two counties, is that reading too much into it? Is there any way for us to be able to tell? Whereas, I'm going to go out, I'm going to casually vote for Joe Biden because, that's what I'm going to do. I do that in California and Illinois, and I don't pay that much attention to maybe the down-ballot stuff. And that stuff gets drowned out by people who are just coming in and just assuming it is what it is. And I mean, what is there any way to get a sense of that?
I think and this is not the sexiest answer, but I think it's a mix of everything. I think there's obviously a lot of questions around that right now, but I think it's a mix of everything. I think people maybe also spend too much time just looking at the shift between 2016 and 2020, including in more urban areas right now where Trump maybe gained a bit, as opposed to the longer term shift in some of these places. I think you mentioned the organizing around Joe Arpaio in Maricopa County, the longtime sheriff that was ousted in 2016, which was very important for political activism in Maricopa, and actually the first big win for Democrats 4 years ago in Maricopa and Arizona before 2020. So in that sense, the local down-ballot visibility and Democratic gains kind of preceded the top of the ticket gains for Democrats in Arizona specifically. And in fact, this year the lieutenant of Joe Arpaio lost a comeback bid for that legacy by a bigger margin in the county than Joe Biden won it by. So that's interesting. The reservation I have about the idea that local elections are driving turnout for higher offices is just that the participation were lower for the participation for anything that isn't presidential is going to be much lower, right? And that's actually an institutional issue because so many county level, state level elections are purposefully scheduled on off-year elections or off-schedule elections in 2021 in April, in March, and then again people vote in November. There's actually a DA runoff in Georgia happening in December that is not on the same date as the Senate runoffs in January, which is also messed up, and the turnout that's going to have an effect on turnout. And obviously that's all a feature and not a bug. Right. So I want to keep in mind just how low participation tends to be in local elections in ways that are fixable, and that making things coincide more would be helpful to drag attention to lower ballot elections.
The only caveat I was throwing in there would just be marijuana would maybe be the one that could drive higher turnout among young people or something like that. But I don't know what the correlation is.
It also primes voters to think about things differently. Like if there's no Democrat on the ballot in a place like Cobb who is really focused on breaking ties with ICE versus Democrat who is, because those conversations happened, those debates have happened, it's going to prime the debate a little differently. It's going to make people see the different sort of contrasts in how the parties are talking. And that's important as well, independently of the question whether they would have voted anyway. Just the contrasts being clarified and the issues that these people affect being clarified.
That's really interesting. Local races as a mechanism, particularly on issues like that, as a mechanism of defining the brand, the sort of the greater brand of the Democrats and the Republicans, for that matter. Is it your sense that local races are a better measure of what the politics are of that locality, of a state houses I mean, do you have that sense, or is that are there other factors that influence that?
I think it's gonna, I think, really just depend on the main. I think the fact that I talk so much about local elections sometimes hides the fact that there's still kind of a desperate situation where these offices are not being contested. The majority of DA elections are not contested, just incumbent running again. When it's just the people kind of go up the ranks. Same with other offices. So I don't want to like hide that forest for the trees where there's still so much work to be done to raise them to the level of importance that they have. What is interesting is that in so many places, in the kind of elections I really focus on, which again are criminal justice related, but this would apply to other sorts of local offices, when there is contestation and organizing and conversation around things that just haven't been part of the conversation around these offices, the expectations of who is winning or who should win or who will win these races and on what message is really being proven wrong over and over again. Like we're seeing in a bunch of suburban places, Republican candidates kind of, or some Democrats, resort to the conventional law and order messaging. What is this person who wants to like not prosecute these type of offenses, or they're gonna like increase crime? That is a very easy resort for candidates to use because that's what we've all been taught works in elections in 30 years. And when that fails in a DA race at the local level, in a way that just really crystallizes the how wrong some of our in the suburban area, that really crystallizes how wrong some of our assumptions and expectations are in the way that's kind of harder to make sense of at the presidential level, right? President Trump lost after a month of tough on crime law and order messaging, but it's hard to tell a coherent story there. But when a place like Cincinnati has a Democratic sheriff endorse the Republican on some like fear-mongering platform of the effects of electing this reformed Democrat, that actually tells an interesting story of the kind of work that ended up being successful, I think.
Yeah, and when that fails, you're saying when the fear-mongering fails again in many places, this is not to say that every reform candidate is winning everywhere that they're running in any way, shape, or form, but I think it's the consistent story is the upending of expectations of the sort of messaging that can win, at least in. All right, we just have very briefly. Do we? So, is there? I mean, is the lesson from this that messaging can cut both ways, but organizing makes a big difference, or is it that the message coming out of this election is just not a coherent one?
I think that again, this shouldn't hide the significant losses at the state level for Democrats, and some of the opportunities they hoped they were going to have going into 2021. I think what people have to keep in mind when they think of what the protests are doing or what local and county level elections are, is that the level of low-hanging fruit in bluer areas is just so immense that there's so much work to be done in places that at the local level vote Democratic, but in a way that hasn't integrated the conversation around these issues, that isn't owning up to the kind of things that all of these local officials can do. There's just so much space for change at the county and city level that there's just a lot of things that can change just in the type of urban and suburban areas that probably are voting Democratic at the federal and state level, but there's a lot of room there. And again, in 2021, there's going to be local races in Philly, in Pittsburgh, in New York City, where a lot of these same questions about criminal justice, but also more broadly about the future of left politics are really going to be central to the elections in the coming 6 to 12 months.
Daniel Nichanian, founding editor of the Appeal Political Report. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Be right back in just a sec. We shall see. And also, obviously, we're going to have big problems in terms of the redistricting. I've seen some reports suggesting that at least on a congressional level, we could lose six or seven seats as a moderate, estimate because of the failure of taking state houses or breaking like a 2/3 supermajority, which will prevent, vetoes of these things. But we're going to be talking about redistricting more as the weeks and months go on. Emma, I want to just play this one clip before we head into the fun half. This is, it's not, I don't think it's a revelation, but here is, as the country is on fire with COVID right now, here is the Admiral Giroir talking about the work the president has done, the engagement the president has had in this one issue.
Admiral, we know who is not shouting that message to the American public, and that is Donald Trump. The Washington Post is reporting this morning that the president has not attended a coronavirus task force meeting in at least 5 months. Is that accurate?
That's true, but the vice president does chair the coronavirus task force. The vice president, we often have several cabinet members there, and the vice president briefs the president every day or nearly every day on coronavirus. So I'm not concerned that the president doesn't attend. The vice president is there, Secretary Azar, the leadership that's there, the scientific community, Dr. Birx, Dr. Fauci, myself, Dr. Hahn, Dr. Redfield. We're all working, and the docs work literally every single day together. We put out over 50 million of the card-based test, another 8.5 million this week.
Admiral, I want to...
So what does he do? He hasn't spoken to Pelosi in over a year in terms of negotiating stimulus.
Don't need to. And then the number one issue in the country, where almost 250,000 Americans are about to have died from it, but they don't count because they have pre-existing conditions, right? They're not in peak physical condition like... Thought it was going to go away.
Right.
Thought November 4th, I was betting it was going to go away. Turned out it didn't.
Vaccine before the election.
Sue me.
Yeah, he seems very hands-on. That's one thing you can say about Donald Trump.
The whole administration, you just had his top COVID advisor basically say there needs to be some type of uprising in Michigan because there's an attempt by the Michigan governor to introduce some measures to mitigate the massive amount of infections that have exploded in Michigan. And the administration is doing nothing except for calling for some type of uprising. And then he backed it off. He said, I just meant vote in 2 years.
Yeah, you might want to not talk about an uprising in Michigan when there was an attempted kidnapping plot, which you then made fun of. That's part of when you think about these nuggets of how horrible he is, it just makes the defeat even sweeter.
All right, folks, we will see you tomorrow. And for those of you sticking around, we're going to head into the fun half of the program, and we will welcome Paul Reickhoff to the show, and he will we'll have a little bit of a debate about some of these issues that we've just discussed. It's going to be we're going to have a tough time with the redistricting, and so I don't know. These things are sometimes difficult to predict, but 2022 could be a real tough year for Democrats in the House. And we could easily lose the House. We'll see.
Well, if we lost seats during this time, seems pretty likely after losing all those state houses that we're primed for it. We're going to call it now and not be happy about it when it happens.
All right. Well, we're going to head into the fun half. Just a reminder, this program relies on your support. You can become a member at jointhemajorityReport.com. When you do, you get you support the fun half. You support the free show and you get the fun half. So check it out, jointhemajorityReport.com. Don't forget the AM Quickie, amquickie.com. 7 minutes every morning. Headline news for you from a leftish perspective, if you will. Also, on top of that, justcoffee.coop. fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate, use the coupon code Majority, get 10% off. Don't forget, Nomi's show starts on Tuesdays, youtube.com/The Nomi Key Show. You can also find that on patreon.com/The Nomi Key Show. And don't forget the Antifada, patreon.com/The Antifada. Matt, what's happened on TMBS this week?
David and I did a think tank for patrons yesterday, and tomorrow it's still coming into focus, but I think what we're going to be talking about what's happening to the left in Britain and Jeremy Corbyn's ousting from Labour and the fallout from that. Patreon.com/TMBS.
All right, quick break, fun half.
In for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy, back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy, back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are...
Psych. Fuck 'em. Almost has what?
Almost
says what? Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total
Pussy.
We're back. It is the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. The famous fun half. We're going to have some fun. Emma, we're going to...
Hell yeah.
All right. Well, listen. All right. So we're breaking format a little bit. Not too much, but we're going to bring in Paul Reickhoff, old friend from back in the earliest of iterations of the Majority Report. Paul, at the time, was the founder of... It was actually Op Truth, and then it became IAVA. Paul, you there?
I am. What is up, man? I guess I got to hit the video button. Can you hear me now?
Oh, nice to see you. And now is the president of Righteous Media. I can tell by your backdrop. And also host of Angry Americans, the podcast.
I was jamming out to your intro song, man. That is That is a funky and very fun remix. If this is the fun half hour, I feel like that is the right mood to bring me in, man.
Somebody, we have a couple of like those interstitials that fans have made that are amazing. I don't know if you could see the visual too.
Oh yeah, the Trump and the Seb and all that. It was kind of an assault on my senses, but it's good. It's better than coffee on a Monday to get woken up and get engaged, man.
There you go. All right. Well, listen. So just to give people the backstory here.
Yeah.
I guess this is a function of the conference call that came out with where the Democrats were doing their autopsy, as it were. And one of the things that came out, there was a couple of different people who were having different issues, and I guess you could say some of the frontline Democrats, not all of them, but some of them came out and said that they were upset about all the talk about socialism and defund the police and maybe other issues that they felt hurt them down ballot. And you weighed in, and then our Twitter feed bot I posted.
That was a bot, Sam? That was a bot?
We just call Dorsey that.
Oh, okay.
And, yeah, we have a bot that basically does that. Whenever we see anything that is like that is in any way moderate, we send our Twitter feed after it.
I thought it was a Russian bot initially because it was a troll picking a fight, and I was like, oh, I just did a show on misinformation and cyber attacks from the Russians, and I was like, great, Sam's been compromised, and his show has gotten jacked, and here's a Russian bot trying to pick a fight with me on Twitter after I got retweeted by AOC. So this is perfect.
I can tell.
Another Sunday, man. Just another Sunday.
I can tell you that I get paid in rubles, and I can give you the best place in Brooklyn to exchange your rubles for cash for American dollars. So, all right. So tell me. And so then you said like, well, I'll go on the show and we'll have this debate. So, all right. Now outline for me, because I wasn't totally.
Okay, so let's take hi, Sam. Nice to see you. Been a long time, right? We go way, way back to the Air America days, right? I didn't hear your whole intro, but, good to see you. A lot of fun times and the weirdness of the early days of Air America.
Indeed.
And maybe perfect timing, full circle. I've got a show that's premiering on Vice tonight with Anthony LePay. I don't know if you remember him.
Of course, from
Guerrilla. He used to run the Guerrilla News Network, and we used to do a thing.
When I started this show, Anthony and I was going to maybe like sublease part of his office. That was one of the places I stopped when I was like looking
awesome.
Like, where could I do this? But yes,
a lot of weird old school Air America crossovers, but he is the showrunner on this new series I'm doing tonight on Vice, and the Air America world's coming back together. I had Mick Foley, the wrestler, on my show a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about the early days of Air America when he was there.
Yeah.
So I want to give you a shot. It's fun to see this alumni network that is now off and doing. I was watching Glow last night, and Mark Maron's on there. Rachel Maddow's Queen of the Universe. I mean, all you guys are doing cool stuff. So it's good to be back with you. And look, this came out of a discussion initially pre-Veterans Day, right? Like a lot of what I'm talking about around Veterans Day is that trying to be a time where we could bring people together. And Veterans Day started as Armistice Day. It was the end of World War I, when everybody put down their guns and said, okay, this is the end of the war to end all wars. So initially I was trying to generate a conversation around the pie in the sky idea that maybe Trump could use Veterans Day as the day to bring Biden to the White House, right? Maybe that's the one day Republicans and Democrats could actually agree on one issue, which I believe is the ultimate populist issue and a centrist issue. And one of the issues that I think progressives blow a lot. I think, especially socialist Democrats, because I was engaging with AOC, right? I think they blow it. I think that's the type of a moderate issue, a populist issue that could move our country forward. But I think it's also low-hanging fruit for the party that they blow. You were just talking to a guy earlier about marijuana. I mean, I think that's another issue that's populist. And I come at it from an independent viewpoint. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm unaffiliated. And I think we are maybe the most underrepresented voice in this country right now. And we don't have a home. That's why I created my show and why I created my company, because I want to give those folks a voice. But I also think there's lessons learned about what appealed to us and what didn't. And my point was simple. AOC is making a lot of great points. I have a lot of respect for her. I think she's a rock star politician. What she's done is incredible. However, I don't think she's the right messenger to talk about the future of the Democratic Party at a time when they're still fighting for Georgia. My argument was this is the Democrats being Democrats. They eat their own. Republicans are assholes, but they get in lockstep and they tend to get what they want. Democrats eat their own. And my point was simply, this is not a great time for an autopsy on your party. It's a time, in my view, as an independent who hopes that the Democrats take back the Senate, to be aligned, to be disciplined, to be focused. And that generated, I think, a respectful conversation on Twitter with AOC and an onslaught of bots. If you want to hit the bot lottery, engage with AOC or Meghan McCain or Chris Cuomo, maybe Sam Seder, I'll see here. But it unleashed, I hope, a productive conversation as well about the fact.
Bots, though, is it? It's not actually bots, but
no, there's a lot of bots, man. There's a lot of oh yeah, I just did a show on Russian cybersecurity. I'm getting a lot more bots than I did 3 weeks ago.
I mean, are they followers? Because I would try that for YouTube. But all right, wait. So all right, so okay, so let's just back up here a little bit. I mean, we can get to the question of whether a fight within the Democratic House caucus implicates Georgia in any way. But if I remember correctly, this didn't start with AOC. It started with the Spanberger, Connor Lamb, a couple of others going after and really, in many respects, the Democratic establishment blaming Black Lives Matter, blaming the slogan defund the police as the reason why they underperformed expectations in these House races. Is that not the way?
I think there's two pieces there, right? Anybody who decides to take a shot at a fellow Democrat right now, in my view, is hurting the Democratic Party, right? That's my view. That's my view. And I don't think you can put that aside because the strategic imperative now. I'm
not putting it aside. I'm just putting it aside so that we can organize this conversation.
Yeah, but I think the strategic imperative above all else is defeating and removing Donald Trump. I say that as an independent. I say that as someone who cares deeply about the future of our country and is very worried right now about the next 2 months. Second to that is trying to be able to get things done. And in order to do that, I think we're going to need a Senate that Biden can work with. So I'm rooting for the Democrats to have a functioning Senate that can move things forward, right? So every time anyone, and let me use a military analogy, anytime anybody discharges their weapon, they're responsible for it, no matter who shot at you. So when AOC sits down and does an interview with the New York Times, hold on. No. Because if AOC does a sit-down interview with the New York Times the day after the election is called, right, and wants to perpetuate this fight, I don't think that's good for her. I don't think that's good for the party, and more importantly, I don't think it's good for the country. Because right now, as a country, we need to stay focused, and I want the Democrats to be strong. But the Democrats are always Democrats, and they're always eating their own.
I'm not denying that you want the Democrats to be strong. I guess, and if I hear you correctly, you're saying it's irrelevant that she may have been responding to attacks from that's irrelevant because
she's a force of nature and she doesn't have to shoot downward, right?
Well, wait a second. Now, we saw after 2018, the Democrats did very well. The early things that the Democrats did when they took office was to demonize Ilhan Omar. They went after Rashida Tlaib. In fact, they stepped all over their messaging for HR1. And so, I mean, I guess if the debate is simply, should Democrats hold off their autopsy until after the Georgia runoff? I mean, I suppose that would be nice. But if it's being engaged in by one side, then it's incumbent on the other side, in my mind, to push back because this fight.
See, that in my view is the flawed strategy, right? If a little kid walks up to you and punches you, hold on. If a little kid walks up to you and punches you, you're not responsible or inclined to punch back. Sometimes you have to exercise judgment, and this is where the Democrats, in my view, hold on. What?
What if it's a big kid? I don't perceive.
Is Connor Lamb a big kid to AOC?
Well, wait a second. If you think this is just about Connor Lamb,
no, I don't. But this is about winning. Hold on, let me finish. This is about winning.
You're characterizing it as.
Let me finish, Sam. Let me categorize my argument correctly. Okay, this is about winning. Okay, and if you want to make an argument that defund the police and the brand of socialism helped the Democrats, right? I don't agree. And as an independent, I saw that happen in places like Georgia and in places like Arizona, where I think the Democrats won with a more moderate message, right? I'm going to use Arizona as the ultimate example, right? That's a place that was up for grabs for the Republicans, for the Democrats rather, because they had Joe Biden, a moderate, on the ticket. They won the Senate seat there because they had a moderate candidate in Kelly. And that, in my view, is a key to getting swing states and the key to winning a presidential election and winning the Senate right now. That's my argument. I don't think there's any denying that in states like Arizona, the defund the police brand and the Socialist Democrat brand hurt them. It hurt them in Pennsylvania. It hurt them in Texas. It hurt them in a lot of places. Now, maybe it shouldn't be that way, and maybe that's not fair, but I think that's a practical reality. And that is my argument, that it would behoove them to recognize that that is, in many key parts of this country, a poisonous, toxic element.
All right, but we got to go back, because you use the analogy of a little kid comes up and punches me. The establishment of the party is not a little kid. The reality is this, like, I understand what you're saying strategically. And if I had the ability to control every single person in the Democratic caucus, or even one person in the Democratic caucus, I would do things differently. If I had the ability to control the weather, I would make sure it doesn't rain on days I'm walking to work, but I don't. So the question is, like, so I will bring an umbrella. And on some level, what we have here is there is a fight within the Democratic Party and the Democratic caucus in the House. And that is to the future of the party. Yeah. And you and I, and frankly, no individual congressperson, maybe short of Nancy Pelosi, has the ability to decide whether or not this fight happens. Okay. And so the fight happened. That is just a reality. I agree with you. If Democrats were more
disciplined, if they were disciplined, and if you and I had teleportation abilities, we would be talking over Zoom. But that's not the case. So the case is that this fight broke out. Mm-hmm. Abigail, Spanberger, blamed, like you did, the idea that people were running on defund the police or socialism. There was not a single Democrat who ran on defund the police. And just like, no, but they all got branded with it. Like, and that's you can't separate the two.
Wait a second. There's a difference between getting branded with it, and there's a difference between running on it. They can't stop people from going into the streets. And that logo, I don't particularly think that slogan's a particularly good one. I like the ideas behind it. I would call it something different, but you and I don't have the ability to do it. Neither does AOC. She doesn't have the ability to say, don't call it defund the police. They're not.
Actually, I think you're letting her off the hook, and you're like this like abdication of responsibility. Every leader, especially a movement leader like her.
My argument now.
Go ahead.
So my point is that if defund the police, if your premise is correct, and I'm not suggesting they run on those things, I never said that, but if your premise is correct, that defund the police and socialist democratic brand of Democrats hurt the Democrats, even though we know the polling was off because it had the wrong sort of like model as to who was going to show up, we would have seen it reflected in the polls that at least the trend would go down.
You saw it reflected in the results of the election.
But wait a second.
This is where you're getting it twisted.
That's not true.
No, it absolutely is true.
Show me the data.
I'll show you Florida. I'll show you Pennsylvania. I'll show you places where, let me finish now, places where it was closer than it ever should have been. Okay?
That doesn't mean that defund the police was the problem.
It absolutely, a culmination of all the things will hurt a candidate, right? And the presidential election is the ultimate test. And if you think that Joe Biden wouldn't have done better if defund the police wasn't out there and socialist Democrats weren't able to be labeled as such, and he was labeled as such.
Yes.
Okay? And the Democrats, it would have behooved the Democrats to pull that back, to be more disciplined in their messaging.
Barack Obama.
And for leaders, let me finish, and leaders like AOC to throttle it back and recognize that it's not working in key places and it will not effectively help them win. So my last point is this. If the Democrats think that the key to winning national and statewide elections is going down the road of AOC and not the road of moderates, I disagree. That's my point. As an independent, as someone who spent 15 years working with purple communities, red communities on issues where I was one of the few leaders that worked with both sides. We passed the GI Bill. We passed VA reform. We got things done that required compromise and some moderation. That's how our Congress works. If we don't focus on a path forward and the radical extremes and the political extremes continue to dominate, we are fucked, Sam. We are fucked.
Listen, you and I agree that we're fucked. But I want to get back to the point. When I say you have no data to show that defund the police, let's just stick on that, or socialism, if you want to say, anyway, was a function, caused this loss. That is, you don't have any data points. You don't have any data. You're just saying the outcome. I could hear. So
that's the ultimate data point.
Let me finish now. That's your story. Your story is the reason why the Democrats underperformed was because defund the police and because socialism.
No. That's not my argument. Is that didn't help.
Okay,
and it contributed. And if you don't think that helped, that hurt them.
Let me finish now, Paul. Please, come on. I let you speak.
Right, but don't misrepresent my position.
I'm trying to get what your position is. All right, so that defund the police didn't help, and socialists didn't help. Now, no Democrat ran on defund the police. That's just a fact. Now, wait a sec. I have a different, that's your story. Your story is it didn't help. I have another story, which is I agree. I don't think defund the police helped. I don't think it hurt. I think the real reason why the Democrats lost was because we had an ineffective Congress for 2 years where the House refused to tie the Republicans to Donald Trump.
Hold on. The Democrats didn't lose. They won.
Let me finish.
You said the reason the Democrats lost. They didn't lose. They won. They won the White House.
Excuse me. I'm talking Joe Biden won, but the Democrats down ballot, they lost. They lost in the House. They didn't pick up the Senate seats they expected. They lost in the state houses. Okay, so that to me.
And you think it's because they didn't go left enough?
No. Listen. What they didn't do was they didn't make the Republicans own Donald Trump. This is not an ideological argument. This is saying that every person who enabled Donald Trump, which is the vast majority of Republicans, the vast, overwhelming majority of Republicans, the House leadership refused to tie the.
I get your point, and I just disagree. I think the reason that they lost is because they didn't present a viable alternative. Right. And let's use South Carolina as an example. Let's use South Carolina as an example. Let's use MJ Hager and Amy McGrath and all these examples. Right. Let's use Amy McGrath, who I had on my show. OK, incredible human being, bona fide American hero, incredible resume, weak candidate. OK, weak, never ran before, no national visibility. Right now, that is a candidate who absolutely in her state of Kentucky, right, is hurt by the defund the police message, is hurt by the socialist branding.
What policies did she run on?
But listen, she gets branded as a socialist in Kentucky, in part because she's a weak candidate, in part because they have no ground game, in part because they're going headhunting in Senate campaigns instead of really building a bench and presenting viable candidates. There were a number of times where they did not have a viable, strong, and I would argue moderate candidate in the places where you
was the ultimate.
But she was not. This is where people get it twisted, right? Like I will argue, it's harder as a woman, okay, to win in Kentucky. We would all probably agree on that, right? Running against Mitch McConnell. If Amy McGrath had been a man, now I'm not wishing she was. I'm talking about the data, okay? Kentucky is much less likely to elect a woman than a man. If you had someone with a similar profile in Kentucky running against Mitch McConnell, you probably would have done better, right? If you're going to take out racist, incumbent, male, white senators, you've got to be really focused with strong candidates who can come from a moderate position and present an alternative to Trump.
All you're doing right now is you're just saying your opinion. You're not.
Sam, that's what you do every day. That's what this whole format's all about. That's what the show is all about, right?
No, I agree. But I mean, there's no data being offered. You're making these assertions. I mean, and let's just be clear here. Your narrative is that. Well, I mean, you're saying
how many Democrats have been elected in Georgia since 1992? Who was the last Democrat in Georgia that was viable, right, and significant? Max Cleland.
Max Cleland, who was
a triple amputee, American hero who came from Central Casting. And this is my argument. If you run someone like Max Cleland in Georgia, you have a chance. If you run an astronaut, okay, in Arizona, who is an American hero, you have a chance, who also has a national profile, who can run as a moderate, who can provide an alternative to Trump in a statewide election, you win. Paul, if you don't, you lose.
Paul, Max Cleland lost his reelection in do you remember why?
Yes.
Because they actually had an ad where
they branded him as a terrorist, and Karl Rove came after him and called him a traitor. Yeah, I know.
Now, wait a second. So do you see that?
Because the Democrats were on weak footing on national security. And this further proves my point, Sam, in a lot of ways, right? The Democrats have always lost.
You're talking over me. Now, let me just finish. So do you not think that the absence of a strong message, a strong economic message, a strong message as to why Republicans are bad, tying them to Donald Trump, the only person who lost as a Republican,
right,
a race that he should have lost in this cycle, would have been a bad idea? Do you think Charles Booker would have been a better candidate than Amy McGrath?
No. And this is I think honestly, I think the history proves it. Running black candidates in red Southern states is tough. It's tough. And this
Democrats in red Southern states is tough.
Yeah, running any. Look. Here's the data. Okay, here's the data. Running black leaders from either party is tough to win in the Senate.
Georgia.
What?
Who has a better shot in these Georgia runoffs?
I think they're both weak candidates again. I think you've got two weak candidates again who are probably, we'll see how much external money they can drop in. But do you really think these two candidates that most of the country never heard of until 6 years ago, okay, who are not really formidable, experienced policy people who are well known in the state with strong name recognition, with bipartisan name recognition? I don't think they're strong candidates. This is a great example of where Democrats are going to unload again, just like they did with MJ Hager and Amy McGrath and so many, and Jamie Harrison, and they're gonna lose again.
Who is the most well-known politician in the country that is in the House or the Senate? I mean, who? I mean, on one hand, you're saying the important thing is a national profile. On the other hand, you're saying that AOC is problematic because she has a
no. We're not. I'm not going back there. I'm saying, look, this is what I'm saying. If the Democrats think the future is for winning statewide elections, for winning national races, is AOC, who is not even a Democrat. This is the amazing part: is how many Democrats. Is Bernie Sanders a Democrat?
No, Bernie Sanders. AOC is a Democrat.
They caucus with the Democrats. Are they really Democrats? Do you feel like AOC? There's a lot of. I've seen a lot of folks loving to claim her. If I were a Democrat, I would not consider AOC a Democrat, right? And I would not consider Bernie. He's a socialist Democrat, which is different. It's basically a different wing of the party at this point.
You're not a Democrat, and she is.
But let's poll Democrats and ask what they think about that.
It doesn't matter.
It does matter. You want data? There's data. Is Bernie Sanders a Democrat? Bernie Sanders is a great example.
Registered independent.
Right.
AOC is a registered Democrat.
Okay. She's registered as a Democrat. Okay. Is she technically in accordance with the values of the Democratic Party? Do you feel like she is a Democrat?
Yeah.
She's a profile of a Democrat or a socialist Democrat.
Sure. Of course.
Okay. This is the great discussion within the Democratic Party that I love to watch. I love to watch Democrats when they decide to add Democrats to their side.
Who is the most Democratic Democrat in your opinion?
That's what kind of question is that?
Well, you just said
Is there a difference between a Democrat and a socialist Democrat, Sam?
I mean, I guess.
Yes or no? Like there is a difference between an independent and a Democrat. There's a difference between a libertarian and a Democrat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Listen, you're a little bit confused.
No, I'm not confused. I think the Democrats are confused. And that's why I love having this conversation with Democrats. Because if you think that AOC is the future of your party, you're going to continue to get destroyed. That's the reality. America doesn't want it.
Paul,
the Bronx wants it. The Bronx wants it, and lots of Democratic activists want it. But in statewide elections and in national elections, it is going to drive more and more people away from the Democratic Party, and it's a recipe for more losses. That's my argument. And you disagree. I respect that. Okay, but give me an example of someone that has been as left center as Bernie Sanders or AOC, who's won in a statewide election in a purple state or on the national level.
Who do you think is the most, you said who would Democrats consider a Democrat? Who do you think is the most democratic example of a Democrat?
If I were going to poll it, to your point, if I were going to poll it, they'd probably say Barack Obama.
Okay. Who do you think?
That's who most Americans would consider a Democrat because he's probably the most well-known Democrat in the world.
Of course, the president. But I'm saying in terms of democratic.
Does that not answer your question?
No. In terms of Democrat, like the essence of being a Democrat, who was the most Democrat?
Let me give you the best way.
Why would you answer my question?
No, because I did answer your question. You don't accept my answer. So I'm moving on to a question for you. Give me an example, okay, of a socialist Democrat, right, or a member of the squad, or however you want to categorize them. And again, I am not judging them, okay, on their principles. I'm judging them on their effectiveness to win elections. And here is my argument: if you want to see how badly they perform, look at national security and defense. They are poison on national security and defense across party lines. Across party lines, they're not voices of
How did Max Rose do?
Impact. What's the point about Max Rose?
Max Rose is exactly.
I know how Max Rose did.
You're talking about,
and Max Rose is proving my point. If Max Rose ran statewide, Max Rose would do a lot better than he did in Staten Island.
Well, that's because there's people to the left of people in Staten Island.
Because Staten Island is a red place, okay? Right. And Max Rose actually didn't run right enough for Staten Island. If he was going to win, he should have run more to the right. I know you may not think so. He may feel right in New York City, but he is not that far right relative to a Democrat like a Connor Lamb, or let's go back to a Patrick Murphy in a place like Bucks County, right? Max Rose looked conservative looked liberal on Staten Island, but he's not that liberal.
Right.
But he's not right enough for Staten Island.
For Staten Island. What positions did he take that were too liberal for Staten Island?
Okay. Standing anywhere near Nancy Pelosi ever.
Well, how could you do that as a Democrat if you're...
I'm going to go back to the same word that I gave you earlier, discipline.
Well, wait. What do you mean standing near her?
Why did he get destroyed in Staten Island, Sam? Because they labeled him as a socialist. They connected him to Black Lives Matter. They did a Max Cleland on Max Rose, which proves my point to you.
How could Max Cleland have avoided him being...
Because the Democrats for so long have allowed themselves to be labeled as socialists and as weak on defense and as weak on police and as weak on the military. And eventually it comes back and bites you. And that's what happened to Max Cleland, no matter how good he is, okay? They were able...
But Paul, don't you understand what you're saying is that regardless of how far Max Rose or Max Cleland ran from Osama bin Laden or from Max Rose was out there. I love the cops. He was running against de Blasio. There is no winning if they're going to tar you that way. If there
no, it's not. That's not the point. The point is that if the national strategy is not cohesive and recognizing
there is no
how those things.
I agree.
I know.
You're in agreement on this. I think Nancy Pelosi's leadership has been horrible.
I don't agree with you on that. I don't agree with you on that. Nancy Pelosi gets shit done. And a lot of folks may not like her. No, really, she has. She gets shit done. And I'm an example of someone who's worked with her and with Republicans and seen her get shit done.
What did she get done?
You want me to how about the GI Bill?
She got that done.
How about Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal? How about things like that? Are those not significant anymore?
You got don't ask, don't tell, repeal. Okay. Well, I mean,
those not significant to progressives?
I don't think that was hard for her to get those done.
Actually, it was very hard. And I was there for it. I was on the ground for it. And there are many people who opposed it, including President George Bush at the time. So it was actually a pretty hard fight. There's a lot of folks now who think don't ask, don't tell repeal was easy and the GI Bill was easy. Those were all hard fights.
Yes.
And Nancy Pelosi's leadership, I will tell you, as an independent, was essential in creating the kind of coalitions that you need to get stuff like that done. And you're going to need it on things like, let me finish, you're going to need it on things like budgets. Is AOC as Speaker of the House going to get a budget through, Sam?
What? Wait, why do you have to make her Speaker of the House? She is
because you're comparing her to the Speaker of the House. And she may run for Speaker of the House.
I'm not.
And she's challenging the Speaker of the House to be a voice for the Democrats. And that's our core argument here. That's our core argument here, Sam. What's the key to Democrats winning, going forward, and being able to govern as well? That's important too. But we'll put that over here, right? What's the key? Is the key going further left?
The squad to discipline the base. Is that the thing?
No.
How do we get them? So you just think
I want them to discipline themselves. I want them to discipline themselves. That's my core argument here, is that AOC would have been better for AOC and better for the party and better for America if she had held her friendly fire until after the election. That's my simple argument.
Wait a second. She did. Why?
She did an interview with the New York Times.
Why are you focusing on her as opposed to Connor Lamb or Spence?
Because she is influential. She is infinitely more influential than Connor Lamb. She is viewed by many as the future of the party.
What about Nancy Pelosi?
Connor Lamb is the future of the party.
What about Nancy Pelosi?
What about Nancy Pelosi, Sam?
Do you think that Nancy Pelosi has nothing to do with trying to discipline or to engage?
No, absolutely.
She's just standing by.
But this is where you and I'm going to keep coming back to the same argument. Personal discipline is what I'm looking for. I expect every leader, whether it's Donald Trump or AOC or you and me, to exercise personal discipline and to be thoughtful and strategic, especially in times like this when the stakes are so high.
How is Nancy Pelosi exercising discipline? Why doesn't she say, hey, we're not going to do this autopsy now. I don't want to hear your problems.
How do you know she hasn't and that AOC wouldn't listen anyway? She's made that clear.
Well, I'm talking about Abigail Spanberger, who came out and directly attacked all of these people. And she did it first.
And so that's it. Like, you hit me first. That's basically the core of your argument, Sam, is you hit me first.
Argument is
that's the whole argument, Sam, from the beginning to the end, is that you hit me first. That's the argument. No. If my kids did that, they go on timeout. If the Democratic Party does that, they go on timeout. And I'm an independent saying, take the whole Democratic Party and put them on timeout. And Sam, with all due respect for you as a friend, put you in timeout too. And come back after January before we have an imminent threat of a lame duck president who has his finger on the nukes.
I got to tell you, you know what, Paul? Here's what I would say, is that if you want to influence the Democratic Party, first you register as a Democrat.
Okay. No. How about this? If you want me to register as a Democrat, convince me I should.
I don't want to.
I know you don't. And that's why you're losing. That's why you're continuing to lose. You won the presidency and you got destroyed. That's the greatest argument I've seen yet for how you were getting destroyed down ballot. If I'm not with you, go piss off.
No. I'm just saying that.
I can't register. I can't vote in your primary, Sam. I can't vote in your primary unless I'm registered as a Democrat. How about open primaries? You want me to align with you? Let me vote in your primaries.
I think I'm in favor of open primaries.
Well, that's a strategic step forward to opening the party to people like me who don't view. I am not convinced that the Democratic Party is a place for me. Well, and neither are many other Americans. That's why so many are declaring as unaffiliated independent, and an increasing number of young people.
No,
many people are running behind AOC. Probably 2 or 3 to 1 are registering as unaffiliated and independent.
They're to the left of the Democrats.
Was that?
Because those young people are to the left of the Democrats.
No, some of them are to the left. Some of them are to the left of Donald Trump.
Well, they're to the left of the Democrats, which are also to the left.
More of them are to the right of the Democrats and to the left of Donald Trump. That's where they are. That's where 40% of Americans are. They are unaffiliated, they are independent, and they are sick of the garbage extreme options of AOC and Donald Trump.
Like what constitutes to the left of Donald Trump and to the right of the Democrats?
To the left of Donald Trump is basically everyone, and to the right of AOC is basically everyone.
Oh my gosh!
Right?
You got to look at some data. You got to look at some polling, buddy. Honestly.
Okay, okay. You want to pick some random obscure person that no one talks about in politics to prove someone is more right of center in the general population's understanding of politics?
About polls.
Okay.
You want to see what the polling is on young people in socialism?
Yeah. What's the polling on young people, Sam? What is it?
Let's pull it up.
Go Google it. I can Google too, Sam.
Well, you should.
Okay.
You should Google.
Look at how many people are registering unaffiliated and independent, okay? And how that number is increasing in America. And if you think the Democrats' future to expanding their power and party is going further left, then we disagree. I respectfully disagree.
Exactly. We disagree on that.
Respectfully.
I would also say that the point is that this fight is happening in the Democratic Party. Is it unfortunate? I don't know that it will impact what's going on in Georgia. Like you say, we have two candidates that you perceive as weak. We have the number 3 fundraiser in the Democratic House is AOC. She's certainly better known.
Did money help MJ Hager and Amy McGrath?
Absolutely.
Jamie Harrison?
And I think Chuck Schumer's got a lot to answer for picking such weak candidates to put so much money behind. I agree with you.
And so you're feeling really good about the candidates in Georgia right now. You feel like they're strong candidates to win statewide election in Georgia.
No. John Ossoff was the most moderate candidate that ran back in those special elections. He was the most moderate candidate they could find. He's got a lot of money behind him.
It's not just about, this is maybe one last point I'll share with you, is I think the Democrats forget populism too often. Okay. They forget the power of populism. And the best case I can make for that, is Arizona. Okay. If you pick someone who is a true populist, like Mark Kelly. Okay. And maybe you could even argue Sinema. Okay. Because Sinema went to the right many times from where she used to be. Right. And won statewide election in Arizona, helped win Arizona. And let me give you one last data point. Here's a data point. Biden won by roughly 11,000 votes in Arizona. There are 500,000 veterans in Arizona. 500,000 veterans who voted in excess of 95%. Okay. And they care about national security, and they care about principles, and they care about defense, and they care about populism, and they care about the kind of leaders you put up. And when Donald Trump attacked John McCain for 4 years, and they presented an alternative in Mark Kelly, they won at the top of the ticket, and they won in the Senate seat. That is an example for me in how you win in places like Arizona. That's an example.
Data that came out of the testing from the Lincoln Project. I think this would be interesting for you, and I think it would be upsetting to you a little bit. Apparently, their big push on that, and I'm not saying this is indicative of anything. I just think it's the only data point that we have about that question. There's no doubt in my mind.
The data point from a group of consultants is what we're going to hang our hat on.
No, let me just finish, Paul. I mean, listen. I'm just saying this is one data point. I definitely think, in Arizona, I imagine there were people who were upset about his attacks on John McCain. I wish it had prevented him from winning in the first place.
But it made the difference in Arizona, Sam. It made the difference.
I have no doubt. John McCain was their favorite son.
It made the difference in a core group of people, a moderate group of people that voted a very high rate, that are willing to switch parties, that's my point here. The independents and the unaffiliateds and what has been traditionally called the center in this country, in my view, is the real future of American politics. And it's also the future to governing. Okay. Because if we continue to try to govern with these extremes, we're going to get nothing.
Paul, I don't know where you were over the past 20 years. Frankly, that you think that the Democrats were so far to the left before AOC, there wasn't a single person who was even remotely close to her.
Really? Bernie Sanders wasn't around for 20 years?
Was an independent.
Okay. I've worked with Bernie Sanders, and where I was for the last 20 years is I was in Congress working on the Hill to pass legislation.
No doubt it.
You know exactly where I was for the last 20 years.
I just don't know that.
5 years prior to that, I was in Iraq. So I know exactly where I've been for the last 20 years, and I've been watching how government works and how politics gets done. Listen. And what I've seen is that the moderates are the ones who've been able to work across partisan lines in any political environment and get things done.
Lincoln Project ran an ad that focused on what that Goldberg story on Atlantic.
Losers and suckers.
Exactly.
Yes.
Apparently that ad helped Donald Trump. They did a lot of testing on all the ads. Look, this is
like a Donald Trump fact point. Like you're telling me about a poll that we don't have data on that comes from
I'm telling you about it.
So we're talking about whether or not one ad worked. That's going to be the entire premise of the argument.
No,
whether one Lincoln Project ad worked.
One data point.
I would argue that losers and suckers hurt him significantly with independents and with Republicans and may have cost him the election.
I would hope.
In a place like Pennsylvania, Arizona, so many states that were close.
Polling or anything to assess that?
Yes, I can share with you the number of independent voters who care about national security and defense. Find some polling data on how many independents, centrists, moderate Democrats, and moderate Republicans care about issues of national security, defense, and veterans affairs.
They move voters. In this election, do you have any data that show, like even exit polling that says that? I'm open
because exit polling is the reliable data that we're going to hang our hat on. I have 15 years of experience working with all different kinds of political communities, working on the national media and at the lowest levels of the grassroots. And I think I have a pretty good ear to all parts of this country. I've traveled all 49 states over the last 15 years trying to get Republicans and Democrats to work together and succeeding on maybe the one issue when they actually do.
Okay.
And I've seen Republicans turn to Democrats and Democrats turn to Republicans.
Your lived experience is the data. That's okay. I mean, I mean that you could be right.
The Lincoln Project poll is your data?
No. It's not a Lincoln Project poll. The Democrats assess all of their ads.
Look, my data point is the election, okay? And that's the most persuasive data point I think you need to see.
Oh, I agree with that election.
It's the same argument that if Bernie Sanders had run, he would have done better than Joe Biden. That's fantasy.
Like Joe Biden.
That's fantasy land. Was that?
You really don't like Bernie Sanders.
I do not support Bernie Sanders, and I do not think he would have won. I think he would have been destroyed.
You're bringing in topics that I have not even introduced. The question was ultimately, you're trying to discipline or suggest that AOC or the squad should be disciplined. And there's
what I said is you keep saying that. Here's my core point, Sam. Democrats should stop shooting at each other, especially in the middle of a war. Okay, that's my core point. If you disagree, then you know what? Democrats are going to continue to look really bad on national security because anyone who wants to make an argument politically or in the national security space that friendly fire is a good thing is not going to do well. And that's what's happening right now. Democrats are eating their own out in the open on your show, on Twitter, and the Republicans are thanking you for it.
Well, I hope
Republicans appreciate it.
In asking for Nancy Pelosi to step back and all of these so-called,
because that would definitely stop the infighting.
That's going to end the friendly fire,
right?
They need to disengage.
So who is your candidate? Who is your candidate to be Speaker of the House and bring the party together over this next 2 years?
Tim Ryan.
Who?
Tim Ryan.
Tim Ryan.
Yeah,
a stalwart of the left.
Well, I didn't say I wanted someone from the left to be Speaker of the House.
You just make my point? I mean, he's a moderate.
Oh, yeah, he is a moderate.
He's like a definition of a moderate.
Exactly. I'm happy.
Did you not just make my point for the future of the Democratic Party?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Because
can we end there? Can we go to commercial now? What do we do?
I think anybody but Nancy Pelosi should be Speaker of the House at this point.
Okay. Well, I don't think it should be anybody other than Nancy Pelosi. But I do think that to end this discussion, you just made my point. With suggesting that Tim Ryan be the Speaker of the House for the Democrats going forward.
Do you want to know why? Because I think Tim Ryan will not have the control and will be exposed, is a moderate. Whereas Nancy Pelosi is perceived as
you think that your Democratic Party wants a white moderate man to lead the House into this next session?
You just said you think he should, right?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that would be a viable political strategic move, except that your party would never accept it. They would destroy him. He would do worse than Nancy Pelosi.
Exactly.
They would. So you want them to eat their own. You want them to put a guy forward that they will destroy from within.
I want them to put a guy forward who will not be able to hide behind the veneer of being a on the left or a progressive and then screw over that actual agenda.
I know Tim Ryan. I like Tim Ryan. He's a great example of somebody that I've worked with on issues over the years, right? I think he is a moderate who can win in a statewide election at a national level. But even as someone who is an independent, I would not recommend a white moderate man be the next Speaker of the House of the Democrats if you want any kind of continuity in that party. I just don't think your party would accept that.
I listen. If I don't think he could win, but you asked me whoever, and I was like,
so then none of this is about winning. This is the Democratic Party in a nutshell for me. It's not about winning.
No, it is.
It's about something else.
I want the left to win.
Okay.
And
so the way the left wins is to put up Tim Ryan so he gets destroyed, and then someone comes in behind him.
So that you can roll Tim Ryan. Yes.
Well, I appreciate your perspective, Sam, and Republicans, thank you for it.
Well, it's the independents who are really the problem, I think, with all.
Right, we're the problem. Keep saying that. That'll make us join the Democratic Party.
Well, people, you shouldn't take it so personally. Who cares what Sam Seder says? I'm not a Democratic official.
I take it personally because the stakes are so high right now. And I think one thing we can agree on is that this president is a catastrophic, immediate, urgent threat to everything. And if we can't be aligned on the simple things, then we cannot be aligned on the big things. And right now, Donald Trump has taken advantage for 4 years of the fact that the Democrats eat their own.
Amy McGrath said she'd work with him. That's the problem with the moderate, but and that's why she lost. We needed a Democratic Party that would show that Republicans are the problem because they are the ones who support Donald Trump. You have Mitch McConnell.
I get it. Your argument is that we are the Democrats. We're not Donald Trump.
That's what Joe Biden ran on, and it won.
He also ran on I'm Joe Biden. And that's what he did. You may not think so, but that's why he won. That's why he won.
Whole plan, Paul, was to make it a referendum on Donald Trump. Nobody contends that.
You have to make it a referendum on Donald Trump and present a viable alternative. And that's what they did and why they won. And if they had presented Kamala Harris or Bernie Sanders or anybody else, we'd be talking about how they lost.
Maybe.
Definitely.
Maybe.
Definitely.
All right.
Get some polling data for next time.
All right. Appreciate it. Paul, it was fun. Thanks for joining.
This is the fun half hour, right?
Well, yeah, but don't you have to go? I thought you had a hard out.
I do have to go, but I appreciate it. And I hope you'll have me back because I love being a part of this.
I will. It was fun. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, my friend.
All right. Bye-bye. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. There it is. I mean, I think, Paul is somebody who just doesn't like the left of the party. And I don't think that there was, I think his argument is you can't win with the left of the party nationwide. And he knows this because he knows this.
I just want to make a comment on the war metaphors and like the desire for party discipline in, a political party or military discipline in a political party. Reminds me of this research. Centrists are the most hostile to democracy, not extremists. Yeah.
Well, I also want to remind him that Donald Trump, he lost to Joe Biden this time around. But let's be clear. I mean, he won last time by saying, by supposedly to the extent that, by crapping on John McCain, by crapping on the military. I mean, it's not like he won by a huge amount, lost by a huge amount. In Pennsylvania and these other states, 10, 20,000 people and whatnot. But I don't know if Paul was so correct that there was that many people, that many vets that were off put by Donald Trump. I would imagine he would have lost by a lot more, right? I mean,
yeah. Well,
he said there were 500,000 vets in Arizona.
I mean, I think the over focus on national security as like this, massive voting issue that needs to be embraced by both parties in this current political climate isn't really updated. Like it's a little bit more 2005.
I think also he would find that that younger people, to the extent that they're unaffiliated, the majority of them perceive the Democrats as not far left enough.
That's 100% backed by polling. I mean,
he didn't have a single data point for the. It's funny he said like next time bring some polls. He didn't have a single data point other than his experience and he's worked.
We should bring some polls, like literally. I mean, I just assume that people have a basic awareness of. I mean,
but they don't. I mean, even on mainstream media, I mean, there's never an acknowledgement. There's Medicare for All is always discussed as a liability with the general public when polling is completely different and in a different reality than that.
It is interesting though that there is a real desire to. It's also interesting to me that he's like aware, like you can't get away with a white male moderate for the House, but at the same time, also, you know, we've got to discipline all the members of the squad.
Don't run black candidates, but also I don't really want to touch on whether Warnock is better situated than Ossoff. I'm going to change the subject to Arizona now.
Right. I mean, I think.
Well, he's aware that he can't say that, but he wants to.
It's going to be interesting if Warnock wins and Ossoff doesn't.
That would be. We should have him back on if that happened.
That would be poetic justice, at least for this conversation.
I just think the Max Rose example is so funny to me because like his entire campaign was basically like, I love the police. Bill de Blasio, you're a disgrace. And he lost like really bad. He lost by 15 points.
And it was a huge, sharp difference from how he ran the first time around, which was a lot about the opioid crisis, about Big Pharma, about his opponent taking money from Big Pharma. It was a populist message in many ways, and then he ran against these protests and lost. He ran to the right.
Well, I guess my point is that if the protests, if the defund the police, and you know, I've been critical of the slogan "defund the police," you know, since its inception, just because I think that like for some people, defund the police means abolish the police, and for others it means you know, redistribute some maybe half, maybe 3/4, maybe 1/4 of their budgets to other services that can perform what they do better. And but if defund the police or Black Lives Matter or the protests or whatever were problematic for the Democrats, you would have seen at least some movement in the polls. The polls had things wrong in terms of like just how big the turnout was going to be. Although you can go back in like 2019, you could look at Nate Cohen writing like, there's going to be a lot of people, it turns out, and this may not help Democrats. I mean, there's a lot of structural things going on here.
Right.
But if you would have seen polling change during the course of the year because it started in like June, right? I mean,
well, to be fair, I mean, the protests, like they apparently did go down like 10 points over the course of a few months.
The protest did.
The protest.
But I mean, you would have seen it reflected in the way that
exactly.
candidates were doing.
If a candidate was running more on a police reform message, you would see that
or even if they weren't,
right.
Even if it was just like it was reflecting badly on Democrats, you would have seen it show up in the polls
in that time
at some point.
Right.
And you didn't. And, you know, the polling was wrong, but it's not like it doesn't pick up changes in things. I think the problem was more structural in some way. And I mean, the idea that Joe Biden was, I mean, yes, Joe Biden was running on, I'm like a good guy. But he was making this a referendum of Donald Trump. I think I have never, it hadn't even occurred to me that would be a debatable question. The problem is for Democrats down ballot is that
You're not running against Trump.
You're not running against Trump. That's why in 2018 we saw them do so well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll remember, like, how big was Black Lives Matter during that time? It was massive, right? I mean, it was because these Republicans were a surrogate at that time for Donald Trump, because Donald Trump was on the ballot.
Right.
When Donald Trump comes on the ballot and you have Nancy Pelosi say, we need Republicans. I'm sorry. Look, the bottom line is, Paul is saying at one point, the reason why they lost was because of AOC and defund the police. Well, why did they lose in 2016? Why did they lose
in
2014? Why did they lose in 2012 and 2010? And
in 2016, they accused the left then, too. I mean, there's never, like, even from conservatives, there's never an acknowledgement or a push to critique the center and the establishment of the party on in terms of the Democrats. It's always the left. It's always the left's problem. It's the Jill Stein voters in 2016. It's defund the police in 2020. It's the same playbook.
Well, and I'm not even like, okay, I mean, that's fine. And people want to push their agenda, but as an argument point, you got to show why 2018 is different from 10 or 2012 or, I mean, on and on. Barack Obama, who he said is the most, celebrated Democrat, probably because he was an 8-year president. And that's what but I would argue that historically people would say FDR, who I think you would describe as a Democratic socialist. I mean, like literally.
Yes.
And Barack Obama, in his 8 years in office, oversaw the loss of over 1,000 Democratic lawmaker seats on a state level and on a federal level. It was so bad that we are still feeling the effects of what happened in 2010. That Democratic lawmakers, governors who were ascendant, we wonder why there's no bench. They were all wiped out in 2010. They all went off and did other things because their political careers ended under Barack Obama, the most popular Democrat and the most moderate of Democrats.
And that goes back to the whole criticism from both AOC, the left, and Doug Jones about an overfocus on personalities. How much of a focus on Obama's personality was there and just kind of his natural charisma and the way he did things as opposed to organizing? The very thing that he got his political career starting doing, organizing on the community level. There was never any of that. I mean, with OFA, he circumvented the DNC. There was never structure put in place to do something like that. And
he demobilized it afterwards.
Right.
That was the big problem.
Well, that too. Yeah. I mean, so.
Is Jamie here? There she is.
Just one more thing about how selfish of him, though, that it's not talked about enough to create that kind of structure, then demobilize it once he's out of power.
Absolutely.
I mean,
he demobilized it when he was president.
Oh, that too. I mean, but
and he did it because he didn't want outside influence. I mean, at that point, after his presidency, of course, because it's done.
It's done, right. But like in terms of actually holding power and changing things from a legislative perspective, it's like the biggest selfish act. And he doesn't get enough flack for it just because people generally like his personality.
Calling from a 509 area code, writes me on IM. This guy wants data points of the 10 incumbent Democrats who lost in the House. 8 of them were the right of the median Democrat in the party per governor govtrack.us's ideology chart. And the 2 that were to the left of the median who lost, Donna Shalala and Debbie Merkezel-Powell, were only just barely to the left of the median. Okay, now, that may be the case, but also know that those seats are probably, their partisan index is probably more Republican than it is Democrat. So those are, frontline districts. But the point is that, like, if you're going to overcome I guess the structural problems that Democrats are going to face is like, how are you going to do it? There is no evidence whatsoever, and Paul, outside of his lived experience, could not provide a single bit of evidence that defund the police or socialism were responsible for these people losing. And then, even if he could, it's like saying, like, keep it from raining. Yeah. Like, it's not like AOC is in charge of millions of people hitting the streets and being upset at the way that our policing is.
Yeah, well, it's right. It's the same, not the same, but it's a similar argument about, like, these leftists are hypocrites for going out and protesting for Black Lives Matter when we're in the middle of a pandemic. So they're, but like they don't critique, because that's an organic thing, right? That just happens. But then they're comparing it to the Trump rallies or something, which is pre-planned. It's a little different, but.
And the I guess the other aspect of his argument that I mean, somehow they should be more disciplined and they should prevent that from happening, and that we need to work together with Republicans. The only thing that is even remotely close to being bipartisan, to the extent that anything can be anymore, and I'll remind you that Mitch McConnell has made it his point. I think there's a piece in the Obama memoir about, like, where they went to him and said, like, we need to do this, and he's like, which part? What makes you think I care about any of that? What your policy is? Criminal justice reform was only one of the few things that's even remotely bipartisan. But I don't know. I think he's got a story. He's going to stick to it regardless. So.
Right. Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, Jamie.
Hi, Jamie.
I really like David Feldman's new character. I think I will say it went on a bit long. It's like, all right, I get it. You're a centrist from way back. You care deeply about the Democrats for some reason that is not related to progressive politics, and you want them to win by becoming Republicans. Like, how long does that really have to go for?
It was genius, the bit where he's calling out AOC for not being a Democrat while he is not a Democrat.
Yeah, that was awkward.
And also misinformed.
That was awkward.
Yeah, Bernie's the one he was thinking of, but he loops them in together.
Yeah, yep. I gotta say, on the topic of defund the police, I have been feeling a little discouraged in general lately, which is a normal way to feel, right? When you are a leftist
and on the left
of any kind in this world, let alone, someone who wants to abolish markets. But I did a little canvassing over the weekend, all right? Because that's what I do when I start to feel bad, is I log off and I do some stuff in the real world. And I canvassed with North Brooklyn DSA in the park for our Defund NYPD campaign that we are doing in coalition with a lot of other groups. And I talked to a bunch of people, and I realized that New York is not the real America or whatever. And I realized that Bushwick is probably cooler than a lot of places in New York. But not a single person that I talked to was against our goal of defunding the NYPD's budget by half and redistributing the money to the services that actually keep people safe, like housing, healthcare, and education. In fact, most people were all about it, and we got almost 100 people to sign up on the DSA mailing list to get updates on the defund campaign from the Racial Justice Working Group. So that made me feel a little bit better, and like the people.
Bushwick's probably representative, but that's still a pretty cool. That's still a cool accomplishment.
But I think that it's interesting that it was about a percentage of moving the budget as opposed to abolishing the police. I'd be curious as to what the response would be.
Yeah, well,
in terms of that.
Some people thought that it didn't go far enough, but yes, abolishing the police is part of our long-term horizon. That cannot happen as long as we still have a capitalist system that has an interest in protecting private property, yada, yada. Like all the people who are like, oh, well, if you defund the police, they're just going to have private security forces. Like, no, in this horizon, we're also going to take away power from the ruling class. So they're not going to do that. But it is
that if you did not get that response, in Bushwick, it would be not shocking, but yes, shocking that there was anybody who that slogan even existed. I'm just saying that, like, yes, in Bushwick, in the park, I would say, yes, I would hope that you would get a decent amount of people, but I don't think, I think defund the police, I think as a slogan is just not,
No, it sucks, but it's there. It's
exactly
like, this is what happened. Activists came up with it, and
yeah, I don't think it sucks.
Like I actually like a lot of things about it. It says what we're trying to do, right? It's not vague, because Black Lives Matter was often chided for being vague on things. It's specific enough that liberals can't water it down with other more milquetoast demands or concepts.
Wait a second. Vague.
It is vague.
Because honestly, I thought you were going to tell me that they had all signed off on either abolishing the police, or I didn't know that you would have a specific amount as the 50%. I mean, it is. I mean, I honestly like defund the police based upon our conversations. I think, like, for some people believe, like, abolish the police.
That's what people who hear that, who don't understand what is trying to be done, believe. Like, they think that that's what, like, defunding it sounds like a wholesale stripping of funds, when what you're talking about, Jamie, is a lot more palatable for people, and that's probably why you had such a good reaction too.
I still like unburdening the police.
Right. I mean,
I don't know about that.
I'm joking. I mean, I
demilitarize the police.
I mean, look, I think like my conversations with people are complex, and it's like people, particularly people who are like, for instance, like I had a conversation, I was in a group of, I was the only non-white or only white person there, for instance. And frankly, like a lot of those people are down with saying, like, completely fuck the police, but they'll also say you want some sort of emergency response. But I don't think defund the police necessarily offends that type of sentiment. So I kind of agree with Jamie. I think it's actually done a lot of good, but I think it's for the reason that Sam brings up. I think it is kind of, it is co-optable. Like, I think people like see it as something that you can move budgets around, and I think that is probably how it's going to be translated.
Well, it already is a co-optation in a way, right? Because
right,
it comes out of the abolitionist movement, and the goal there is not simply to defund the police. It is to long-term style abolish the police, along with the social relations that make the police a thing. But defunding, as I explained to this one guy who was like, well, that doesn't go far enough. I would call it a non-reformist reform, right? It's a step that we can take, a practical step that we can take right now. All of the candidates that we have endorsed for city council in 2021 are going to be working on this project because city council has a lot of power over the budget. It's a short-term step we can take within this framework and within an abolitionist horizon to get us there. And the last thing I'll say about this is I feel like people often go a little too quickly to the slogan and to the PR aspect of a thing before they figure out the underlying politics, right? Like, defunding the police is not just a slogan. It's something we have to do if we want to achieve socialist goals.
I know.
And I would hope that we decide our politics based on what is the right thing to do to get the outcome that we want before we figure out how to sell it.
Of course. I mean, of course. I think we're all in agreement. I mean, I don't know if I'm in agreement about abolishing the police, but I would love to have the budgets of police slashed at least by half. I would go maybe ultimately further, but I think
slash the police.
Slash the police. That would.
I don't think you want that.
But the point is like just the fact that we on this show can still like have some like debate or even like questioning as to what it means, where, you know, like I'm like, oh, okay, 50%. And then Jamie, you are saying, but ultimately we want to abolish. That's indicative of a slogan that might be difficult to sell to a broader audience. I mean, that's just, but again, I still feel like, you know, you don't get to pick these things.
Right. It happens. So we work within the confines.
You work, exactly.
Right.
And it's like, okay, it's raining out, I wear an umbrella. You know, like it's like,
right.
Or it's sunny, I got to put some, you know, suntan lotion on.
Which makes the tying of AOC as some mastermind behind this is like working at a marketing PR firm with Antifa and like coming up with this, right? It's so disingenuous.
Exactly.
Because it's just someone who's in power who's saying, no, I'm not going to kick protesters in the teeth, metaphorically. I'm going to embrace what they came up with because what they're coming up with is organic. And, you know, embracing organic grassroots, that's good politics if you're a leftist leader.
Yep. Of course.
Any kind of leader, I would say.
Right.
Like,
Well,
hence what we talked about with the GOP and QAnon. Like, give them a chance, folks.
Yeah.
Right.
And I will say, dislike of the police is, I think, more widespread among the Democratic Party base than you think it is. And maybe even than the polls could measure.
I think it's more cross-racial.
Anti-polls. But like, it's, I mean, from the people I've talked to, it's cross-racial. I talked to Black people who want to defund the police. I talked to Latino people. I talked to white people. People are pretty into the idea. Now, again, not representative necessarily, but
wait a second. Defund the police. When you talk to these people, are they talking about abolish the police? Or are they talking about cutting it to the 50% or what?
Well, no, I was talking about our specific campaign to defund the police by half.
I mean, I just
New York City.
Like, I don't know. I mean, I had some of these conversations I with Trump supporters. I know it's a different thing, but like, even if you come at them with a sympathetic tone and you concede to some of their other framing, like they may be too far gone, but
they're authoritarians. Yeah.
It's amazing. Right. But even people who are vaguely apolitical who in my life, like, you know, yes, some like they're all the white people who I'm talking to. They don't like the defund the police slogan. They don't like, oh, you know, not all cops are bad. That's kind of what they go to. And so, yeah, I don't think it's that important in the broad scheme of things. But those people that you're going to try to win over, the people Biden was targeting, right? Yeah, I don't think they think defund the police is a good slogan. I think it turns them off.
Yeah, I mean,
know. But if we're looking for a realignment, a working class realignment of the Democratic Party, maybe we don't need people like David Feldman's new character.
Right. I agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's evidence that at least a portion of the working class has an issue with that as well. I mean,
yeah, well, people have been propagandized to, and they've been subject to the insanely powerful ideological apparatus of this system. So the opinion's not going to change overnight, but we really got to be talking to people, right? Slogans are never enough on their own. We got to be talking to people one-on-one, having conversations about what this actually means. And the fact that the police do not produce safety, right? Yeah. A lot of the time when you see polls, people saying, oh, do you want more police in your neighborhoods? I really think what they're actually saying is they want safety. And the police that's the only way they know how to get safety. Yeah. I think once people realize that that's actually not what the cops are doing, they're going to change their minds.
I think to talk about the circle of trust, though, like I would say, when you have these conversations with anybody, it's like, what happens if some suburban guy comes in with an AR-15 and starts mowing people down in my community? Because we do have problems like this in our country that are going to require like armed first response. I think you need to actually sincerely address that to people before you can start pitching them on like a more extreme abolish the police agenda. Because I always find that is a real question. It's not like some right-wing propaganda thing. People want to know who they can call.
Also easier to massage, like, for example, cop loving is so cultural as opposed to economic. So like I could talk to Trump supporters, and I did, and convince them that Medicare for all for citizens, they would always put that caveat, not illegal immigrants, right? But like that was a good idea. and you could talk them into that. But when it comes to police, there's so much culture and like culture war stuff that's drummed up by the right that brings up all of these emotions that other economic issues where conversations are more productive don't. It's just my other. And that's why I think slogans are a little more important in that area.
Yeah. South Dakota progressive. I've talked to registered Democrats in South Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, and usually defund the police is dead on arrival. The reflexive response I get from people, even when explaining how it's more of an issue of redistribution, is, well, we have to support police. In conversations I've had, it always gets reduced to an argument of whether or not police are supported. And I have yet to meet someone in real life who doesn't say police have to be supported.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is not to poll the world, but to change it, right? The numbers are not where they need to be right now. But guess what? That's the task of the organized left, is to spread consciousness, and, you know, more and more people will realize that we're right about this issue.
Right. We're talking about it in terms of its impact on this election. And so I think that, like, yes, I think we're all in agreement at the very least. I mean, I do think that that we need some measure of policing in this country. I think you would find that even in neighborhoods where the police are a measure of control as opposed to actually like protect and serve. In some of those issues, you're talking about under policing, as it were. I mean, you know, as bad as that term sounds, but I think we're all in agreement that we need to redistribute, and we shouldn't have police be the biggest line item in a city's budget by any stretch. But we're talking about it on a political level in terms of what does it do to in terms of its impact on the perception of voters in real life across the country, broadly speaking. What does it do to their perception of political institutions that are associated with it? And that's what we're talking about. And so, I mean, I do think, but again, you can make that analysis. You can come up with, it's great for a political party to be associated with defund the police, or you can come up with, it's horrible for a political party to be associated with defund the police. But it's also, in some instances, like this one, it's not necessarily the choice of the political party, broadly speaking, as to how closely associated they are. The other party is going to do that. Like Barack Obama, not a socialist. A lot of Republicans think he was. Joe Biden, not a communist. There's a lot of Republicans who think he was. And the only way that you can deal with that is to have something else that doesn't create a vacuum, so that narrative takes hold with people who are persuadable. And the problem with the Democrats, in my estimation, was they didn't have anything. They didn't have anything to pivot from. You get attacked as being, a communist. You get attacked as being anti-police. You got to be able to pivot to something. And the Democrats, all they had was, we're going to protect pre-existing conditions. That's a good thing, but that's not exactly a lot of things in your arsenal.
Right. Well, I mean, I happen to believe that they chose to have a non-existent cohesive policy strategy by design.
Yes. No, that was the strategy. Without doubt.
Okay. But like, it also is a terrible electoral strategy. And so
unless you're Joe Biden running against Donald Trump.
Right. Unless you're Joe.
You're just like, you got a binary choice. Right. It's me or the horrible guy.
Democratic can mean anything you want it to mean, bro. And then you lose all these down-ballot races.
That's exactly the story.
I mean, that's be fungible, but be losers at the same goddamn time.
Now, but wait a second. We say Joe Biden won.
Right.
But isn't that a little bit hard to believe?
To me.
It's a little bit hard to believe for Jesse Waters. This guy's a super sleuth, and he's starting to do a little bit of calculations. Joe Biden didn't go to have any campaign rallies during this pandemic. Who's Joe Biden? Just a former vice president. How did this guy win?
turbulence, obviously, but there's a sneaking suspicion, me and a lot of Americans, that Joe Biden was installed somehow, some way. I can't prove this allegation, but it's a gut feeling. But that's why you do these kind of investigations. Do you kind of have that feeling too?
Yeah, I do, because it's multifaceted.
Oh, of course, because it's multifaceted. It's multifaceted. He was installed. How did this installation happen?
Well, clearly by some foreign government, right? So now they're just copy-pasting Russia conjecture and the investigation, and now saying that basically Biden's the Manchurian candidate. I wonder which country installed him. Probably Ukraine, probably China, maybe Chai Crane.
Chai Crane did it. And of course, they're sitting back and they're going, presumably they're saying this in Ukrainese, or what is the language? What do you speak in Ukraine?
Ukulele.
I don't know. Or Chinese. And they're saying, who are we going to choose? We can have anybody in office that we want. What about, let's get the oldest candidate, the one who will have no political future within 2 or 3 years.
Let's play the shortest game imaginable.
Exactly. We have this whole opportunity to this whole field of 20 candidates that we're going to pluck from the Democratic primary. Let's get the one who has the shortest horizon of being on there to install. That'll fake everyone out. And hopefully Jesse Waters will not catch on that we are installing a candidate because we chose the one who has the shortest timeline.
Right.
Well, they got to maintain power over him. You know, if they get one that stays too long, they might get a mind of his own.
That's fair enough.
That's actually, you're on the next level there, Jamie.
That's some 18-dimensional chess that you're playing. Now, speaking of 18-dimensional chess players, the word has gone out to all the right-wing talkers that the legal battles are going to fail. All the big law firms are starting to pull out. They're realizing like they're making asses of themselves. And I say this as someone who firmly believes that every single person who is charged with a crime, regardless of without even contemplating their guilt or innocence, deserves a defense attorney. That's not the same as every possible plaintiff who is attempting to do anything deserves an attorney. I think you get judged as an attorney if you take certain clients.
Well, but then in this case, the attorney is Rudolph Giuliani.
Well, but there's other massive law firms that have been representing, and the biggest one that was left dropped out of the Pennsylvania case. So they have to move on to the next thing, which is just common sense. Let's stop letting let's just stop letting the courts adjudicate this and the experts. Let's just use common sense. Common sense, like, could Joe Biden have actually won? I don't think so. That's what Dave Rubin's telling us.
Somehow, to me, the idea that Joe Biden, who did not campaign, who we all know has cognitive problems, who's not going to be in charge, and all of those things, you're telling me he got something like 15 million more votes than Barack Obama?
Yeah, that is a hard one to swallow.
Something ain't right here. Something ain't right here.
Yeah, it's your candidate, Trump. Like, again, we were talking about how the Democratic Party loves to blame the left for everything. Why don't they blame their president for botching the whole pandemic and 250,000 Americans are dead and the economy is in shambles? Like, could that have had something to do with the fact that the American people saw an alternative president?
I think what I would suggest to Dave Rubin is Google presidential approval ratings and look at how many people do not like Donald Trump. Is there more, Rubin? Oh, let's play a little.
Is that Trump in the last 4 years, and even before that, because it was before he was president, at almost every turn has got the media to expose themselves as what they are. He has gotten almost all his opponents to expose themselves for what they are. He's gotten people to chase crazy conspiracy theories and say things that a week later they find out are untrue. He's gotten smart people to be screaming about Russia and now saying nothing about potential errors or violations in voting. So he's played this game so well that the reason I see some possible chance here is that it seems odd to me that the guy who got everything right, pulled the mask off all of these people for 4 years, only to get to the end of the game, the big boss, if we're in a video game, right? He got to the end of the movie and he didn't have a weapon in his pocket. He didn't have something. Now, maybe that is possible, and maybe he was doing so much of this on the fly that he didn't prepare.
I personally
it seems
think
to me that something's got to be there.
Oops, that time where you think you're genius turns out to be just an idiot.
Yeah.
That's full on Q stuff, right? I mean, that is the Q. That is the Q mind structure, which is like, oh yeah, no, Trump has lured them in, and he's got some big cannon in his pocket that he's going to take out, and it's not there. You know what I find hard to believe? Dave Rubin is one of the dumbest people I think I've ever come across.
Certainly.
In public life, who is in a position of explaining phenomena to people. I've come across a lot of dumb people who are very famous.
He doesn't even believe it.
But he doesn't. You don't think he believes anything he's saying?
I mean, he's gotten to believe some of it, but God, the grift is so open. I mean, he's just so openly cashing in.
I find it hard to believe he's doing this well. That's what I find. That's very suspicious to me.
You don't have to be doing well when you have like right-wing money just backing you up.
He's got like a
propping
$4 or $5 million house. I think there's something very suspicious about that.
I don't know. I think he believes in it the way a lot of people believe in astrology. You know, it's like, oh yeah, it'd be fun to believe in that. This is a game to me.
I think that's right.
Right. Well, that's a great point, because there's no emotional connection to it. That's what happens when you really divorce all consequences from politics, and it just becomes about yourself and narratives and personalities, and he doesn't care about outcomes. It's just about selling books and outrage.
Yes, that is also that's like the Tim Pool formula too. He doesn't. Tim Pool really doesn't. Although Tim Pool, I think, is actually smarter than Dave Rubin from a business sense. I think Tim Pool just is like, oh, this works, and he's really he's raking in the dough. But we'll have more to say that. Here's my question. This is and we only have a couple minutes left there. Okay. Donald Trump tweeted out, I think it was today or yesterday, like all the big constitutional issues are going to be brought up now. We are now 2 weeks out from the election. And they have been talking about voter fraud and election fraud before the election, but since the election, like literally in the first minutes. And for some reason, like at one point, if I'm a Trump fan, like, am I going to start to wonder, like, why do they keep not showing us this evidence? Was it like a week and a half ago where we were like, where Rick Rennell was on television going, oh, Lou Dobbs, I got all the information. And the only reason why we haven't filed it yet is because I had to do this TV hit. This seems to be like their whole MO. Sidney Powell, who is the latest iteration of Trump's lawyer, talking to Maria Bartiromo, saying, oh, we have got the stuff. We just can't show you yet.
Yeah, we have so much evidence, I feel like it's coming in through a fire hose.
Wow. So, Sidney, you feel that you will be able to prove this. Do you have the software in your possession? Do you have the hardware in your possession? How will you prove this, Sidney?
Well, I've got lots of ways to prove it, Maria, but I'm not going to tell on national TV what all we have. I just can't do that.
Well, I went on national TV.
Okay, but you have a small time frame here. The elections are supposed to be certified in early December. Do you believe that you can present this to the courts and be successful within this just couple of weeks?
Well, let me put it this way. First of all, I never say anything I can't prove. Secondly, the evidence is coming in so fast, I can't even process it all. Millions of Americans have written, I would say by now, definitely hundreds of thousands.
I gotta learn how to say I'm being sprayed with a fire hose of evidence so much I can't even handle it.
I'm being waterboarded by this information.
I'm drowning the fire hose directly into all my orifices, and I'm just being abused.
But the beauty is too, it's like this evidence is so great that I can't even tell for sure if it's evidence. There's so much evidence I couldn't possibly tell you if it's actual evidence. That's how much evidence it is. Like the definition of evidence is we have a lot of people calling in. Right. And I would imagine at least 20% of that are people, at least are internet trolls calling in saying like, hey, listen, I witnessed 5 black people voting. And I'm willing to sign an affidavit on that right now.
Wearing
so much
Ukrainian
evidence. So much
t-shirts.
evidence.
Yeah. Oh my God. As literally they're dropping all their claims. I'm reading right now. Pennsylvania, they had to basically adjust their court case. Michigan, they had to drop it. Montana, they had to drop it. The Maricopa County, it was dropped. But yet they're prioritizing going on cable news.
Emma, with all due respect,
right?
Guess what you don't understand?
I don't have the fire hose coming at me.
Well, first of all,
right?
You don't understand how to run a legal case. What you do is you bring a lot of cases, you drop them, you make everybody feel confident, and then you take the fire hose out, just spray them with evidence. I wonder if this lawyer will ever go back to any firm and walk into a room and not feel total embarrassment. But let's continue.
The evidence is coming in so fast, I can't even process it all. Millions of Americans have written, I would say by now, definitely hundreds of thousands have stepped forward with their different experiences of voter fraud. But this is a massive election fraud, and I'm very concerned it involved not only Dominion and its Smartmatic software, but that the software essentially was used by other election machines also.
Incidentally, the Dominion Smartmatic thing started in Michigan. There was one polling place which had not updated the software. There was a glitch. They found it immediately. There's not a lot of places that are using this, and the software just needs to be updated or it won't function. Right. And that's what the whole thing, I think Gizmodo wrote up something about it, days ago. But once they get a story like this, it never dies.
It's just this circular logic, right? Where the lack of evidence or evidence being challenged or overturned then just proves a bigger cover up.
Doesn't that seem suspicious that there is a lack of evidence?
I heard processing it. There's so much of it. They need time to process it all.
Right.
The processing, I'm having trouble processing why there's so little evidence. That seems highly suspicious. That's sort of exactly what you would do if you were perpetrating voter fraud, is to hide the evidence. Interesting.
There might not be any evidence at all.
Which would be total evidence of the existence of that evidence, because that's what you would be doing.
Crack that code. Isn't it suspicious?
Very suspicious. We got a bunch more clips we don't have time for. I'm going to take it with some IMs. We're going to have to play some of these. The Proud Boys were out and about this weekend. We'll play some of those clips a little bit later. They're chanting Fox News sucks.
Trump TV, baby.
There's so much cash to be made on that right-wing media grift. It's unbelievable.
Why don't we just jump ship and do that?
I mean,
you think I have never thought about that?
I got news for both of you guys. I was plotting that in 2005. I had the whole thing mapped out. Half of my firings from Air America I was going to leverage as I got pissed off. The liberals didn't like what I was saying. I was a truth teller, and they fired me. And I was like, I had to go through this whole thing. Like it involved, like if I needed to have a divorce earlier to sort of do it, because that's exactly like the inciting event that you would have, like the libs. And then I got divorced because my wife is such a lib, and I just decided. Then I realized that
Feminism.
Women are horrible and like they're feminazis, and then boom. And then that's why started. That's why Michael and I started doing the Ken and Ken show, was just because we were like, oh God, this would be so great. We could actually do this. I was actually thinking at one point, like, we'll just do the Majority Report, and then we'll also do Ken and Ken on a regular basis, and that's where we'll make all our cash.
No one will know the difference, or no one will, like, none of the right wingers will tune in to either, or there will be no crossover, right?
Yeah, probably not. We could have gotten away with it.
That is literally what Tim Pool said about why he doesn't have a girlfriend. He was like, it's feminism.
Incel logic.
Incidentally, and we'll talk about this tomorrow a little bit. It turns out like Tim Pool does actually have Zoom or Skype at his house. I just saw him show up on the Ben Shapiro show. So,
well, I thought you were going to say he had a girlfriend, and I was very incredulous.
Right. No.
I mean,
Beanie
he's busy.
Equals, and then the slash through it girlfriend. Those do not go together.
I mean, I'm actually surprised by that. You'd think at one point. All right, let's take some IMs. We got to get out of here. Silver ball stud. I used to think moderate means explain things level-headedly as a whole picture. Given that definition, I'd like to hear a moderate explain the unique differences of defund the police at the municipal level instead of just saying, I don't support that, given it's not exactly a House vote like Medicare for all. They could help themselves if they bothered to answer strategically. DPOV, regarding Max Rhodes, he also got backlash for appearing to march in a BLM protest. Also, he had hordes of Lib volunteers in 2018 for the Blue Wave take back the House efforts, which he had none of this year, obviously. Interesting. Damien, can someone go over when to use less and when to use fewer? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because every single leftist YouTuber seems to use these incorrectly. Sam, Hassan, Nomiki, Pacman vouched, that Kyle guy.
Language is about communication, so you could use either one.
Thank you.
Boom.
Cuck Hunter. Paul Reickhoff's unshakable certainty that Democrats are too radical weak on national security and in disarray, circular firing squad, is proof of the effectiveness of Republican Fox News messaging. Space Lenin. A major issue with that guy's perspective on needing moderates, read conservatives, to win elections becomes stark if you care about politics for outcomes in the face of issues like poverty and climate change rather than winning elections for the sake of winning. Democrats have to be Republicans to win. The value of Democratic win is now zero. Well, he just wants to be Democrats to be. The problem that Paul has is there's some issues he agrees with Democrats with, and then others he doesn't, but he's completely alienated from Republicans. And so he wants Democrats to be with him on all of his issues. Mm-hmm. I don't know why, and I think, frankly, like, where are the moderates in the Republican Party? There aren't any.
Yeah.
And I think also, like,
so maybe it might be more fruitful to encourage moderation on the Republicans as opposed to just telling the Democrats to constantly lose while going.
I think Paul also has a brand.
Yeah,
and that I think, I mean, I have a feeling he's going to run for something at some point.
Oh, maybe they should start their own party that more accurately reflects their views.
I think
a third-party spoiler that would draw from the lame centrists.
Yeah,
get them out of the electorate. That's what we need.
Oh my God! And the New York Times editorial board immediately endorses them.
Big Mac. Paul brought no data points and was hostile towards any reference to data by Sam. Seems like he knows he has no evidence to back himself up. Chud, I live in Arizona. There's little to no evidence that Trump bashing McCain had anything to do with Biden winning. Trump's biggest negative here was amongst older white voters in Maricopa County was his handling of COVID. That guy just gish-galloped and shifted goalposts when called out on every topic he switched to and then appealed to his own perceived authority when cornered.
Well, I mean, didn't Nomi say McCain had something to do with it, or was that somebody else? I don't know.
I mean, in
2018 with Sinema, that could have been part of it.
It's hard for me to imagine that a senator who won re-election I don't know how many times John McCain won re-election, like 4 or 5, whatever it is, died of a brain tumor in office. It's hard for me to imagine that you could get away with crapping all over him in the way that Donald Trump did and it not help you.
Yeah.
That would be...
And McCain is mythologized nationally and especially in Arizona.
I mean...
Trump won 2016, though. And he had been shitting on McCain for a while.
Yes. But
right.
I think when McCain died, I think it probably... I mean, I can't... I don't think it had anything to do with him being a vet. You would imagine the vets would be the most sensitive to that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you would imagine that Trump would not have been able to, would have won every single one of those 500,000 vet votes that are in Arizona after he said, I like my war heroes to not get caught. Like, that's not enough to inspire you. I think it was like, I think if you're talking about motivating vets, that would have been the thing that did it.
Yeah.
The rest of it is just like, hey, he crapped on our state senator and that made us feel bad.
I mean, I think COVID now is probably the bigger deciding factor. I think that's true. But I'm curious about what 2018, getting the Democratic Senate seat, what happened there?
COVID also cut both ways. Because in districts where you had COVID infections rise the most recently, now, Trump overperformed. So it would have been consistent if he had performed the same way that he had before. And that's why COVID is rising there, because people listen to Trump and they don't do anything. Mm-hmm. But the increase, that is, we need to dig into that. That to me is nuts.
I suspect that what's happening there is a lot of the places that are hit right now, like the increase, are like these middle of the country places that this is essentially their first wave. So they've had all this time to basically be in denial. I was in North Dakota this summer. People didn't think COVID was real, and it really wasn't real yet there. And I mean, maybe I just don't think, I think if this wave hit those places 4 months earlier, then I think that my theory is that would have had a bigger impact then. And those places are lean Republican anyway, and their economies have been great. Like South Dakota's economy is booming. And they, like, I know that those places got really helped out by the CARES Act too. So I think like the economics might show why those places went harder for Trump than the COVID.
Vets also donated most to Bernie in the Democratic primary. Brendan reminds me. I don't know. I just think that story is not as, I don't think that Paul's story is the story. That's basically what it comes down to. And admittedly, we're both just telling stories. It's just his seems completely absent of any other, any substantiation at all. But Buck Samaru, here's another data point for Paul. The GOP the last 20 years keeps letting the fringe lead their party to complete domination of state legislatures. Rube Davin, in a red district, a Democrat with Republican policies will lose to a Republican with socialist policies. H-Dub. Yes, Jamie. Cloward and Pivens, bro. Clowards and Pivens, bro. This guy's argument is that moderates should be able to attack the progressives as much as they want, but it's completely unacceptable for them to respond to anything. Also, before the squad was even in Congress, Dems were attacked as socialists and lost massively under Obama. Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Lost under Obama.
And it's good that the squad let them draw first blood here because they came into this in good faith. They, for the most part, as far as I know, really do identify as Democrats. And people need to see how far the mainstream of the Democratic Party is from its brand and the perception of what they do. And people need to see that these people are not our friends.
Yeah.
Ghost of Herman Cain. Until 4 years ago, I lived in Kentucky my whole life, 47 years. Paul is simply dead wrong about Democrats needing to moderate there. That's what they have always done. The state party is a joke, and the most popular politician there is Representative John Yarmouth, a lefty who unseated a hardcore neocon who held the seat for 10 years. People want a choice, and Democrats running as Republicans is not a choice. I don't know if Booker would have won, but
he would have had a chance. And
he would have
created something.
He would have created something.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he would have had a chance. I don't know. I don't know. But what he would build en route to trying to win he would have the next candidate, if maybe it was him, would be able to build on.
A la Stacey Abrams.
Exactly.
Which is why, I mean, I don't know if you saw, but like I'm pretty disheartened by Jamie Harrison being the front runner to lead DNC.
Yes, exactly. Bravo-matic did not care for your Crossfire reboot. Yeah, I know. I didn't enjoy it that much either. Socialist Sam, Nancy Pelosi did good things 10 years ago with me. So I think she's an effective leader despite not being able to keep her party from firing on each other the second we took back the presidency and me having no examples of anything she got done during this term of her serving as speaker. South Dakota progressive. I think part of Paul's argument was that he would like to see the left wing of the party explicitly disavow the term socialism and defund the police, because even though they didn't run on it, people of his persuasion see them as approving of these terms. I think that's probably true.
But when you asked him if he wants them to discipline the base, he denied it. So
yeah, well, it's seems like what
I mean, I think that is probably what he wants. And Joe Biden did that. Maybe that would have helped politically, but it also would have disempowered them going forward. And sorry, like the idea that somebody, and I say maybe, but the idea that, Connor Lamb would have said, I'm not socialist. Even AOC said she wasn't socialist.
Yeah.
Or even AOC said, don't defund the police. Like, wait, what? How's that supposed to work now? Oh, we're taking AOC's word for it because you say, but we're supposed to take AOC's word for it. Like, I'm sorry. This is not going to go away.
And Fox News would say, yeah, but you really believe Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez?
Right. Not only is she for defunding the police, she's a liar.
And a bartender.
This is why they're hiding it. I mean, come on, give me a break. Not the way it works.
It's pure concern trolling. There's no evidence. And absent the evidence, you got to ask yourself, why is this guy so hostile to things like defunding the police? Not that hard to figure out why a rich white guy would be. Sorry.
I mean, it really is concern trolling when you're not a Democrat and talking about here's what the Democrats need to do to get me. Like, oh, please.
Yeah.
I know that is... Jordan, Paul's point that the progressive part of the Democratic Party that claimed to the Democrats running behind label socialist extremists silly. Democrats have been always called socialists by Republicans, and running a campaign with only "no, I'm not" isn't effective. Yes. Sam's hanging Chad. Not sure who got what I got out of that second interview besides maybe an ulcer. I can't figure out his points were, if he had any. And yes, please, no one try and convince him or anyone like him to join the Democratic Party. Yikes. Carl from the guest, can we start with policing? Why don't we start with policing the police? Barrett, home, me too. You guys can't figure out defend the police. Can you imagine the people who are not politically involved here? I think you mean defund the police. Ice Teamfer, Sam, what do you think of the notion that as someone in your position, your job should be to help and amplify the message of people in the streets rather than spend months picking it apart? Defund the police is a fine message and would be in a much better position if people like yourself got behind it. I mean, what do I think of that notion? Start your own show. I'm going to do what I think makes sense. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I think the slogan is good. I've said that to the extent that I understand what it stands for, I'm in favor of that. I have not, made a big issue of bashing it because, like I say, it created the environment. It attracted a lot of people. It worked for a certain period of time. But if you're going to ask, if you want me to tell you something I don't believe, I can do that, but you're going to have to pay extra for that. I'll have to set up some type of VIP thing where I will tell you everything you want me to say, even if I don't believe it.
OnlyFans.
Yeah, I'll do that for my Cameo. How's that? Yeah. I'll set up a Cameo where I will say it's going to cost. But no, I feel like my job is to tell you my opinion, and you can decide. There's so many other shows out there that you can watch if my opinion in some way is just, I don't know, upsetting you too much.
Well, they're saying that you maybe need a new opinion on it. I don't know. I understand that you've been talking about it in terms of like narrow horse race electoral campaigns, because that is most of what you focus on. But I do think you should also be looking at it in the long term as a social movement. And there are some really, really smart people who've been working on this for years and years that I would recommend you talk to, because I feel like you might change your mind a little bit.
I've talked to some of those people, and I just think that I'm also fairly smart about communications. I've done this for 15 years. I've done it on radio. I've done it on podcasts. I've done it on television. And I can tell you, outside of, like when you get outside of the certain confines, the slogan, defund the police, is a bad one. I don't have a problem with the movement. I don't have a problem with what they're trying to achieve. I've said that many times. Focusing on electoral politics over the past month and a half, 2 months, because of this major election. Talking about it now in this context because it's in the news. So I don't think it's fair to characterize me as just being interested in electoral politics. I've had Alex Vitale on to talk about the concept of defund the police, and that it ultimately, in his mind, wants it to lead to abolish the police. I have a difference of opinion on whether we should have abolishment of the police. I could bring on people to talk about under policing in areas. There's writers. I just haven't gotten around to doing that yet. But it's not. I'm not knocking the movement. I am talking about the slogan and the idea that I should just fall in line, because if I sit here and say defund the police is a good slogan, I know all you people out there, a lot of you people hear it and you don't understand what it means or this and that. I'm just not going to do that. That's just not what
I just want you to keep an open mind. I understand we're gonna disagree on this, probably.
My perspective on this has gotten more critical of the slogan as I have had more experience with different people receiving it. I started out definitely more sympathetic to the slogan than I am now, because I kept an open mind.
Well, maybe the movement should hire some consultants. I don't know.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just assessing it. Again, if it's raining outside, I'm going to say you're going to get wet. If it's sunny outside, I'm going to say you could get sunburned. That is what I'm doing. And so it's not a question. I'm not saying they should hire any consultants. It is what it is. But we can also make an assessment as to whether it's effective or not. I think that actually goes to the heart of your credibility as someone who's making these assessments. I have a different job than someone who is married to that term. I'm not. I can, push for that goal in another way, which is to sort of actually describe the agenda. Because even the context of this, it's if I'm not sure, I am genuinely surprised that when you were in that park and talking to those people, that it was 50%. I am genuinely surprised. I presumed that you would say abolish the police.
Well, that's not what our city council candidates are working on right now.
No, I understand. But I'm surprised. And the fact that I'm surprised, I think is indicative of maybe there's some confusion around that term.
Yeah, well, we got to do more than sloganeering, right? We got to do political education and spread the word. And maybe you're right in some cases. Maybe there are places where it just isn't going to work at this moment in time. But I think maybe we just need to wait and see. It's quite early.
Yeah, I have not said people should change that the slogan, or I'm calling on whoever's in charge of the slogans to change the slogan, or I'm completely. It is what it is, and I am doing my best to sort of educate people to what it's about. And I think by not acknowledging the some of the limitations of that slogan, I'm doing a disservice to what I perceive as the agenda, which is to diminish the resources that the police department has, particularly relative to other agencies and, frankly, like other things that should be happening in the city.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I think you just hit upon one. I'll just say one last thing about this because I know we're totally out of time. One thing I like about the slogan is actually you can talk about both things at once, right? You can talk about the short-term goal, the effort, the grassroots effort to defund the city police budget by half. And it also points in a more radical direction. And you can talk about the long-term framework in which these policies are situated. So in that way, I kind of like the slogan because it means both things at once, and it gives you a chance to talk about both things at once.
Yes. And I actually think that is, I agree with your assessment of it, but I see that as a liability. I see that as a liability of the slogan, because I think that, like, in terms of actually achieving the first part of that, I think it hurts. It's like this, like, I don't care what it is, like, like in a, even at, like, you're trying to get somebody to do something. If you provide 2 action items, that's much less effective than providing one. And so, I mean, that, but our assessment of the slogan is the same. It's just the efficacy of how we perceive that assessment is different. Lastly, final IM of the day. Shoot. There we go. Volume 2 of Capital. Sam, what accomplishments have Pelosi done? Paul, well, 15 years ago, she helped change the military policy so our soldiers can now commit war crimes while being open about their sexuality. You're welcome, Commie. All right, folks. See you tomorrow. Oh, my God. It's 3:08.
I take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie.